Monster Synthesis Master. Chapter 401. The time for the counterattack has arrived. Welcome back, Member Lin. The curly-haired baboon was also depressed. It had used its skill, but it had actually lost to Fu in the fight the landlord, which it was best at. Curly hair, are you all right? Link could not help but ask. The curly-haired baboon sighed. Master, I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me. Let me be alone. You're really fine? Link asked. I'm really fine, the curly-haired baboon said. I'll be alone for a while. Link and Ah Fu stood up and left the casino. On the way, Fu kept looking back at the autistic curly-haired baboon with a worried look. Boss, is the curly-haired baboon really fine? It just couldn't figure it out for a while. It'll be fine in a while. Link knew this feeling very well. The curly-haired baboon was extremely talented and had claimed to be the second gambling monster after Chen Daizai. However, it had encountered the biggest crisis of its life today and was beaten to a pulp by the Black Panther Emperor. This time, he had to doubt his life. At this moment, Fu's phone rang. It was a call from Penny on Penguin. Hello, Supervisor, what's the matter? Is the boss beside you? Turn on your phone, I have something to talk to him about. The penguin's voice was a little rushed. Because Link had to spend the week with his pets, he didn't bring his phone with him. He was afraid that calls would disturb the rare parent-child time. In addition, he was accompanied by his subordinates wherever he went, so there was no situation where he could not be contacted. Ah Fu turned on the speaker with practiced ease, and the voice of the penguin, Penny, came from it. Boss, the latest situation at the front line. The joint forces of the Shandu military and the Inhumans were attacked by the enemy's long-range artillery when they were building the front line. They suffered heavy losses and all their supplies were taken away by the enemy. And according to the situation of the troops being deployed in Shandu, the military headquarters of Shandu is preparing to launch a second attack. After saying that, the penguin waited for Link's instructions. When Fu heard the report, he raised his eyebrows and was a little shocked. If the Shandu military suffered a crushing defeat at the front line, wouldn't that mean that the enemy would be even more arrogant? The Weeping Valley was a line of defense for Shandu. Would it be dangerous? Link was expressionless. This was just as he had guessed. In his previous life, even Alongso had made this mistake because of the lack of detailed information. It seemed that there were hundreds of millions of reincarnations in history. Alongso had been killed in this life, and the military and political system of Shandu had changed to the military committee system. Such a situation was inevitable. Link thought for a moment. Tell the Ministry of Media that this can be spread around, but don't mention it in the newspapers, including the gossip newspapers on the streets. Don't mention anything about the defeat either. Okay, I got it. Boss, is there anything else I need to pay attention to? The penguin, Penny, asked. There's nothing else. If everything goes as expected, the war situation will soon take a turn for the better, hee. After hanging up the phone, Fu pouted and frowned. His facial features were almost twisted together. With his dark skin, he looked like a black egg at first glance. Fu, why do you look like that? Are you not feeling well? Link glanced at Ah Fu and asked. Ah Fu scratched his head in confusion. I just don't understand why the four commanders of the military council in Shandu, despite their plan failing, still organized a second wave of attack like children. In my opinion, this is completely an act of suicide. Why can't they see through this with their vision and ability? Fu didn't finish his sentence. This kind of suicidal behavior would look stupid to the bystanders. You're trying to say why the four commanders, who had outstanding military achievements and were all leaders of the army, would make such a stupid mistake that no normal person would make, said Link. Ah Fu nodded vigorously. Boss, you're amazing. You've figured out what I wanted to ask in such a short time. You're indeed the boss. Yes, a familiar recipe, a familiar taste of flattery. The two of them slowly walked to the basement of the Colosseum and walked all the way to the audience seats. From there, they could see Black Tornado running around happily. After they were seated, Link said slowly, "When you encounter this kind of thing, you can't just stop at the surface. You have to learn to see the essence through the phenomenon. You only saw that the four commanders had lost their minds and wanted to regain their dignity like children. If you want to analyze the motive, you can't just look at the matter itself, you have to look at the driving force behind it. Let's start with my departure without my participation. They wanted to make some achievements to win back their reputation among the people of Shandu. I've been too famous for the past few months. After General Alonso and Moros were killed, there was no owner in Shandu. I took over all of Moros' properties and unified the slums. In addition, Alonso gave me the title of Battalion Commander of the Special Operations Battalion when he was still alive. I can be said to be successful in both the black and white military and politics in Shandu. Everyone calls me the new king of Shandu. It's even to the extent that they've acknowledged me as the highest official representative of Shandu. Public opinion is naturally good for me, but from the four commanders' point of view, it's a serious threat to their status. It makes them anxious, and this is an impact on their reputation. I have control over all the media outlets in Shandu. Television, newspapers, and advertisements are all under my control. As long as I want to, their names will disappear from these media, and their influence will become weaker and weaker. In terms of the economy, all the military expenses in Shandu come from its revenue. I'm the Minister for Economy and I'm in control of all the industries in Moros. I've unified the slums and reached an unprecedented height in Shandu. It can be said that 60–70% of the military expenses in Shandu come from the taxes paid by the Lin's financial group. Once I stop paying taxes, with the wealth of the four commanders, their troops will definitely rebel in less than 2 months. This is the foundation of their foothold, and without their troops, they are nothing. Therefore, when the pressure from all sides comes together, it will become a huge mountain that will crush the four commanders. I'm here in Shandu, and they're just dying a slow death. Without me, everything will collapse. The desert coalition forces will invade, the security will be chaotic, and there will be fights in the slums. The Sand City will inevitably be destroyed. They had no other choice but to fight with all their might. However, their first attempt failed. If they turn back to me now and word of this gets out, the four commanders' reputation will be completely ruined, and the Inhumans will no longer trust them, even their subordinates will not trust them, losing their basic foundation. Therefore, they could only try again and bet that they could win a beautiful battle to recover their losses. Other than that, do you think they have any other ideas? After listening to his boss's detailed analysis, Afu suddenly came to a realization. If we don't go all out this time, we'll just die a slow death and be completely controlled in the future. However, there was still a chance of survival if they fought this wave. This might be their only chance, Ying Luo. Fu couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. He had always analyzed problems from the perspective of the Lin's financial group and the boss. However, when he put himself in the perspective of the four commanders, he suddenly felt suffocated. It was as if he was about to break out of a cage, but outside the cage were 4 high walls that made him despair. Now Fu finally understood that people's movements could be distorted under pressure. Moreover, it was not a stupid move to organize another army. It was a desperate choice. Once this operation failed, there would only be one path left in front of them. Then, boss, what do you think of this operation? Will they succeed? Fu asked. It's not realistic to kill the Alliance army of the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang in one go, Link said. You have to slowly take their territory and resources. When they reach the critical point, their seemingly solid alliance will be gone, and that's when they'll send out their troops. They're sending out their troops this time because they felt that they were careless last time and didn't have the power to attack from the air. This time, they would send Air Force escorts to the south of the Goria Grand Canal to counterattack, and they would be able to smoothly enter the desert. However, they had still underestimated the machinery faith, or rather, they had underestimated the pioneers of machinery. A centipede dies but never falls down, not to mention that the mechanical pioneers did not suffer any losses. I'm afraid that the Air Force's planes can't even cross the Goria Grand Canal. Ah Fu was extremely surprised. To be able to get the boss's praise, it seemed that this mechanical pioneer was indeed quite capable. By the way, Fu, is the 9-patterned dragon still in your Ling Vulture Palace? Link thought of the 9-striped dragon that he had killed in an alley on the night of the gang siege in the slums, and his soul had been extracted by Fu. Fu nodded and summoned his coffin palace. Not just his soul, I've also preserved his body. Boss can have it anytime. He opened the vulture's palace and saw the 9-striped dragon's soul, which was the size of a knuckle. Your boss has been dead for a few months, and the weather in Shitu has changed. Fu has told you all these, right? The 9-striped dragon nodded after a moment of silence. Ever since his death, he had been locked up in the Ling Vulture Palace and had listened to Fu's explanation of the situation outside. The 9-striped dragon, in its soul state, had nothing to do every day except to meditate. Thinking back to what had happened before his death, he had become a soul after his death. All his karma had been cut off on the night of the gang's attack. After that, the 9-striped dragon met many druid sages in the Spirit Vulture Palace and was inspired by them through conversations. Now, he had long let go of the hatred of his life, but he was still confused about the future. Would he be locked up forever, or would he suddenly be refined into soul essence by Ah Fu one day and become a great tonic? Will you still go against me after you come out? Asked Link. Everything that happened before I died has ended, the 9-patterned dragon said humbly. You and the boss of Green Dragon are like brothers. You've been friends for decades. How can you cut it off so easily? The dead can't be brought back to life. Moreover, the Sand City is now in President Lin's hands, thriving and thriving. It's laughable that fireflies want to compete with the bright moon. Hearing the 9-striped dragon's words, Link couldn't help but look at Fu. Why did the unparalleled domineering 9-patterned dragon suddenly feel like an eminent monk after his death? The way he spoke was almost the same as King Kong. Could it really be that one would be enlightened after dying once? Fu shook his head to show that he didn't know. He didn't open the Ling Vulture Palace every day to see it. Who knew that the 9-striped dragon would become like this? What if I can resurrect you? What are your plans? Link's lips curled up as he asked the real question. The 9-patterned dragon was stunned for a moment. He suddenly laughed and said, President Lin, please don't make fun of me. There have been many druid sages who came in before, and I have some understanding of death. The dead cannot be resurrected, this was the law of the heavens. It's easier said than done to reverse the heavenly laws. I just want to ask, if you were to be resurrected, what would you want to do the most? If there's really a chance to be resurrected, I'll choose to join Lin's financial group and see for myself how far my former opponents can go. All right, said Link, but please remember what you said today. Fu closed the vulture's mouth, and the 9-striped dragon once again sat cross-legged to meditate. He was still envious of the 9-striped dragon's double dragon life providence. This was a rare growth type ability, but the boss of the Green Dragon had restricted the effect of the ability. Double Dragon Life Providence. With the life providence of 2 dragons, it can bring prosperity to the master and obtain 10% of the master's attributes as additional attributes. As a dual-mode player and NPC, Lin Ke was destined to break the ceiling. If he could subdue the 9-patterned dragon and make it his subordinate, his growth would definitely be first class. In addition, he was already at level 25+, elite. With this specialty, it was only a matter of time before he became a commander-level monster with some training from Zhan or Li Zijun. As for the method of resurrection, it was all in Link's plan. Now that the underground database was being built, the spy mouse would be able to transmit the data into the database after it was completed. By then, the various plans of the machinery faith would be traceable. Whether it was the cloning technology or the immortality project, they could resurrect the 9-striped dragon. However, all of this had to wait for Dave, the master of machinery of the 3 fields, to build the database and then integrate the knowledge within. However, it was only the beginning of version 1.0. Link had all the time he needed. "Alright, go and get old Jin. I should return to the Weeping Valley." Link packed up and left. The call from Penny in Penguin also revealed an important piece of information, which was that the 4 commanders in Shandu had begun to organize a second attack. If things went as Link had expected, the Second Army would be deployed tonight, and they would suffer a crushing defeat soon. He would have to clean up the mess then. There was a fast tunnel under the Colosseum that led directly to the Weeping Valley. Link, the macaw, the hellhound, the curly-haired baboon, and Black Tornado quickly returned to the castle. "I heard you've been studying these days. What are you studying?" The macaw turned to the side and said cautiously, "I'm not telling you." Since the macaw was not willing to tell him, Link did not intend to force it. After a week of rest, his relationship with his pets had improved. In the process, he had also gained a lot of new experiences about how to get along with pets. The first thing Link did when he got back to Windhowl Castle was to call the Military Intelligence Department. The deputy director of the office, Ren Yi, was yawning with his feet on the table. In the past few days, all the missions related to the desert had stopped, leaving only a few missions in Shandu. The originally lively Military Intelligence Department was now deserted. The Inhumans who came here were not even as many as the Military Intelligence Department's staff, and they were almost bored to death. Ding, ding, ding. Suddenly, the phone on the office desk rang. "Who is it, calling at night, Ran? Ren Yi grumbled as he picked up the phone. The next second, he straightened his body and said in a serious tone, "Good day, Director." "Yes, I'll arrange it now." "I understand, don't worry, Chief." After a phone call, the dispirited Ren Yi swept away his dejection. His eyes lit up, and he clapped his hands to signal all the staff to pay attention. "Everyone, get ready. The division chief has a mission to assign. We'll resume work tonight." For a time, the Military Intelligence Department was filled with cheers. The scattered players looked at the cheering staff in the empty Military Intelligence office and were puzzled. Had this group of people gone crazy from boredom? At 9 o'clock in the evening, the army of the 4 tribes of Shandu entered the desert through Weeping Valley. It was 11 o'clock at night. When Link was on the balcony with a cup of coffee, he saw a fire rising in the distance. Immediately after, a laser beam shot into the sky, and the sky lit up with an explosion like fireworks. He knew. War. It ended. He said. It was time to leave the mountain. P.S. The next chapter will be between 1 to 2 o'clock. Cultivators can wait for a while. Thank you for your support. Today's monthly votes have risen rapidly. I'm very grateful. Chapter 402 The New King of Shandu, A Flawless Plan. According to Link's request, the 6 major departments of the Lin Financial Group were on standby tonight, waiting for Link's orders. When the desert a few miles away burst into flames, Link knew that the allied army of the 4 tribes and Inhumans had failed. The Air Force was the first to suffer losses. When it passed by the floating mech city, it was hit by a laser attack. 1 reconnaissance aircraft formation and 3 fighter aircraft formations were all destroyed. However, the commander was still cautious this time. Only a portion of the troops entered the enemy's long-range firing range, and the carpet bombing only hit a portion of them. When the mechanical army of the Machinery Faith, the armed jeeps of the Wasteland Gang, the bunkers in the desert, the Esper mercenaries, and the Inhumans of the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang appeared, the balance of the war clearly tilted, and the remaining Shandu troops could only struggle on their last legs and put up a stubborn resistance. Link called the think tank's director, Penny Penguin. "Penny, get all the departments to get into action. Get the hospital ready to receive the wounded." "Don't worry, boss. Everything is ready." All departments under the consortium are in position and ready for combat. Chief Penny was full of confidence. You've all worked hard. It's not hard, I'm just serving the boss. Link hung up and walked out of the castle. In the yard, Link's pets were waiting for him with solemn expressions. Link scanned through them one by one, and his gaze finally fell on the new members at the end of the line. Cameraman chickens, when you're shooting later, be sure to pay attention to your own safety. You can only bring back the material if you're alive. With that, Link looked at the macaw, asking it to translate his words for the cameraman. The macaw stepped out and walked to the camera chickens. After a few clucks, all the hens extended their wings and saluted, indicating that they were strictly following Link's orders. It was a cheap and useful tracking and recording device that Link had synthesized. It was a new creature created by combining a camera and an old hen. It was also a new member of Lin Kei's pet army. This was the first time it was moving with other pets. Monster attributes. Name, Camera Chicken. Grade, White. Race, Pheasant family. Attribute, Electronic. Level, 1. Initial skill 1, Chicken Head Stabilizer. The chicken head is a natural stabilizer that can be used to film in harsh environments of excellent quality. Initial skill 2, the hen lays eggs. The camera chick will discharge the content it captured in the form of eggs. Comment, my hen. The production cost of the camera chicken was extremely low, and the shooting effect was also excellent. The only bad thing was that if they died, the images they had captured would be lost and couldn't be extracted. This was why Link had to repeatedly emphasize that he had to be careful during the night. After all, the death of the cameraman was just a loss of his life, but Lin Kei had lost the highlight of the scene. All right, said Link, clapping his hands. Everyone, get into position. We'll arrive at your designated location. The pet army disappeared from Howl Castle. Link followed closely behind and headed towards Mystic Wood City. At night, Shenmue City was brightly lit, and all the lights in the city were on, making it as bright as day. At that moment, the square of the Azure Wood City was filled with people. Link walked up to the platform and looked around. Everyone's eyes were filled with desire and battle intent. He met Link's eyes without fear. Star Constellation walked up to Link and reported in a low voice, the Kylan Hall, Dasaki, the Secret Alliance, and the Freemasonry have all sent their own high-end combat teams. MNA led the water transportation gang and other forces, and they were responsible for surrounding the slums of Shandu. He also said that he will help us keep an eye on the situation in the city. Once someone tries to harm us, he will punish that person. Link glanced below the stage and saw the valiant Kylan Hall generals led by Bob, the shamans led by Alan, the Dasaka shamans, the core members of the Hidden Alliance led by Simon, the uncomfortable turtle elder Wu Sansi, who was wearing a red archbishop's robe and picking his nose, as well as his 4 adopted sons and elders. The media is led by Huang Chuan. Then there was the deputy battalion commander of the Shuda Special Forces, Benjamin, who also took part in the battle with his military dogs and soldiers. There were 2 battalions in total. The Moon Shadow Druids had also sent out their members, which consisted of apprentices, official members, elites, and Inhumans. As for the number of Inhumans, because it's constantly changing, it's impossible to accurately calculate. The rough number is in the thousands, and it's still increasing. The 2 battalions led by Benjamin were at the corner of the square, following orders in an orderly manner. The Druids of the Moon Shadow Council, on the other hand, were getting ready for battle near the Druid district. Behind the slums were the players. Link looked around. Miracle, Myth, Callan's Heart, Friendship, Desert Wolf, Traveling Dragon's Branch, and a few other guilds were all gathered in Godwood City. There were also many players who rushed over from Shandu or rushed online to the Military Intelligence Department to accept missions. The scale of the Inhumans in the square was gradually expanding. You guys should already know what happened, right? Link asked from the stage. The members of Lin's financial group nodded. At first, they had gathered here according to the president's request, thinking that they were going to attack the front line with the army of the 4 divisions in Shandu and the recruited Inhumans. However, the guild leader didn't make a move, so they were confused. Finally, 10 minutes ago, they received news that the Shandu troops had failed to break through the defense line and were ambushed halfway. The front line was defeated and the army was completely routed. At this time, they all sucked in a cold breath and finally understood why the president chose to bide his time instead of following the main force to the front line to fight. If they had followed him, they would have been dead bodies by now. The Inhumans behind him also knew about it because they had received a mission called Protect Shandu from the Military Intelligence Department. This quest could be accepted by any player above level 10. The rewards were given according to battle achievement, which was a rare occurrence. It was a growth-type quest. Now, the defeated soldiers at the front line are fleeing in disorder. Seeing that our troops have been defeated, the enemy will definitely chase us all the way and try to cross the bottom line of Shandu. Link's tone was calm, but his words were filled with strength. Now, it's time for you to make a name for yourself, he said as he slowly spread his hands. The members of the slums at the front of the team were all eager to make a move. Since the unification of the slums a few months ago, nothing major had happened in the slums. Their fists had become rusty, and their guns had rusted. Previously, at least there would be occasional gangsters or criminals to deal with, but after the Inhuman descended on a large scale, it was almost as difficult to see gangsters in the slums as winning the lottery. Now, they could finally go all out and fight. The players at the back of the square were so excited that their faces turned red. I did not wait a week in Shenmue City for nothing. Wind-chasing Wolf clenched his fists and looked at the task of Protect Shandu. From the moment the Military Intelligence Department began to reduce the number of missions, he had realized that something was about to happen. At the same time, similar organizations in 4 other places of the military headquarters in Shandu had a sudden increase in the number of tasks. As a result, many players went to the 4 divisions of the Shandu military region to do missions, while the members of the Miracle Guild, where Wind Chaser was, chose to watch. A few other major guilds had the same thought as Wind. They were all involved in the plan to infiltrate the city, so they all thought it was abnormal. Therefore, in the mouth of some busybodies, Wind-chasing Wolf, who stayed to pledge loyalty to the NPC, became the representative of fools. The people who used to envy Wind for being on Link's level were now celebrating. They laughed at Wind for being a burden. Not only had he been defeated, but he had also destroyed Miracle. Finally, after holding back for a week, the plot welcomed a turning point. Hey, Zui Feng, do you have to go this far? Those who know will understand that you want to try out the power of the Blue Fist, but those who don't know will think that you're constipated. Lost Mo Wen, who was at the side, said sarcastically. Zui Feng glanced at Mo Wen, who was beside him, and replied, "Are you angry? At the very least, the things I got matched it perfectly." He wasn't like a certain someone who had drawn an Esper's special item, which even benefited Yayao. Kalen's heart thanks the Myth Group's guild leader for the generous blue equipment. Lost Mo Wen choked and was speechless. A total of 6 of them had participated in the quest, but in the end, he was the only one who had randomly drawn an equipment that did not match his class. Instead of giving it to the other solo players in the guild, he might as well sell it to the vice-guild leader of Indigo Heart, Yayao Ling, at a high price. The money he received would be used to improve the elite members of all members. This incident had always been the laughingstock of the 6 players who had participated in the mission. After all, among the top players, the unlucky ones were quite rare. As Link finished, Star Constellation began giving orders. Benjamin, who was at the corner of the square in the city of Godwood, led the Special Operations Unit into action. The players followed closely behind, as if they were afraid that they would not be able to snatch any monsters if they were late. Finally, the forces of the slums followed them out of the city. The crowded central square of the Divine Wood City was instantly cleared. Iron Fives from the machinery faith, your grandpa is here. A ray of white light flashed, and a player suddenly appeared in the square. He had originally heard that there was an oath-taking assembly at the square of Azurewood City, and the military intelligence department had given him the mission Protect Shadow. However, when he went online, he was dumbfounded. The central square was empty, and the street lights shone on the mottled shadows of the trees. In the screenshots of the forum posts, there were no more shoulder-to-shoulder encounters and no more human voices. There were only his own embarrassed shouts, which echoed back and forth in the square. And Link, who was staring at him from the stage. Link pointed at the military intelligence department. The player immediately saluted Link and awkwardly slipped away with his tail between his legs. Link shook his head and chuckled. He then headed to the place with the best view of the Divine Tree Noe to supervise the battle. Under the night sky, the intense battle in the distance could be seen to have reduced, but the sporadic flames of war were approaching very quickly. The lights of the cars in the desert were entangled with each other, looking like dancing fireflies in the night. However, under the dance of these fireflies, the Shandu troops and the Desert Coalition forces took turns to fire, putting on a life and death show. Link used Beast's ILV-10 to bind himself to the Sand Eagle. Then, he used the Eagle's eye to stack the effects together, allowing him to see clearly 7.5 kilometers away. The troops in shadow were defeated, and the enemy chased all the way to a place 5 kilometers away from Weeping Valley, but there was no sign of retreat. After Link and John sneaked into the city was heavily damaged. Link had also torn open a hole in the fortress along the river. The allied army of the desert had lost all their momentum after witnessing the fearsome power of the Tentacles dragon. However, the troops in Sidhu had failed twice in a row and were schemed against by the Desert Alliance army. This time, the main force had suffered losses. This gave the Desert Alliance army hope of entering Sidhu. Hence, he ordered the soldiers and believers to continue the pursuit and probe the current situation in Shandu. This time, the pursuers were all armed jeeps with high mobility. Even if they discovered an ambush, they could retreat immediately. This kind of formation that could attack and retreat, and could fight guerrilla in the desert, was the most difficult formation that the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang could come up with after the alliance. It was an open-top armed jeep with a light machine gun in the back. There were 5 people in a car, including the driver. Among them were the Wasteland Gang mercenaries, as well as 2 to 3 mechanical zealots or mechanical warriors to provide reconnaissance, medical treatment, or firepower. The combined firepower and mobility of the 5 of them was far more threatening than a tank. In such a one-sided defeat, each armed jeep was like a living meat grinder, reaping the lives of the players and the soldiers of Shandu. With the current speed of the Desert Coalition forces, they would soon reach the position set up by Star Constellation. I wonder if these enemies will be enough for the Inhumans and members to split, Link said in a low voice. The ancient guard beside Link said slowly, Dear Lord Noxie, I wonder if I can make a move later? I've prepared a lot of cannonballs here. Link's eyes twitched at the sight of the pile of round stones beside the ancient guardian. Just attack the target that's the furthest away from you. Don't attack the formation or the crowd, in case you accidentally hurt your own people. This is great. With the addition of the ancient guardian, these enemies were really not enough to split. When the ancient guardian heard this, it picked up a huge rock with a diameter of about 1.5 meters and held it with both hands. Its deep eyes looked into the distance, as if it was choosing a target. Then, who is the lucky one who has the chance to bear the anger of the ancient guardians? Everyone was in position in Weeping Valley, waiting for the enemy to approach. At the same time, in the military area of Shandu, the 4 commanders could no longer sit still when they learned that the front line had been defeated. Army Commander Fernandez sat in a chair in a daze and kept murmuring, It's over, it's completely over. The army has lost 60% of its forces. Dai Yi grabbed Wimbledon's collar angrily and roared, It's all your fault. Why did he have to instigate another war? Now that we've fought this war and lost all our forces, we're done for. Wimbledon pushed Dai Yi away, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. 3 fighter formations and 1 scout formation couldn't even get to the city. My losses are even greater than yours. Who would have thought that the city's air defense would be this strong? Only Commander Mun was relatively calm. Although he had lost a lot of fox hunters, compared to the other 3, his biggest trump card was Link's close friend, his son Benjamin. Even the Mun Kingdom didn't expect that his son, Benjamin, whom he was so worried about, would become his source of confidence one day. P.S. I hope everyone can vote for Wanjun. The next chapter would be released around 5 to 6 o'clock. Wanjun gave it her all, and she hoped that everyone would vote for Wanjun. Chapter 403 Your lives are about to come to an end, and I will be crowned as Ying Luo. The 4 commanders knew that they had lost their only chance to turn the situation around. If they failed, their popularity and reputation in Shandu would plummet, and the mission office that they had invested a lot of effort in would also have no reputation among the Inhumans. The most important thing was that losing a large number of soldiers meant that he would lose his authority in the military committee and his prestige in the headquarters. This situation was already on the verge of collapse. In the next military council meeting, they would no longer have the confidence to challenge Link or be on par with him. What's the point of all this noise? Now that the front line has been defeated, the enemy knows that our main forces have suffered heavy losses and will definitely send a mobile frontline force to the border to test the situation. Commander Mun stood up and turned to the 3 of them. I'm going to the Weeping Valley to check out the situation. Who's coming with me? Win Leighton and Dai Yi, who were fighting with each other, pushed each other and stepped back to tidy up their crumpled and messy clothes. Fernandez, who was sitting, put his hands on the table and got up with difficulty. His eyes were dull. I'll go. He was the one who suffered the most losses in the battle at the front line. 60% of the Shandu army had been destroyed. It could be said that after 2 battles, they were left with high paraplegia. In comparison, the Mun Kingdom and Dai Yi suffered the least losses. The fox hunting special forces had a small number of people, but to be able to become a special forces soldier, each of them was strong. Even if they were in danger at the front line, with the experience from training, they could avoid the enemy's pursuit and find a place to hide, or use their own abilities to successfully escape back. The Mun Kingdom wanted to go to the front line of the Weeping Valley to see how Link would stop the enemies and also to figure out his attitude towards them. Just as the 4 commanders were about to head to the front line of the Weeping Valley, the battle at the front line was about to begin. The ancient guardian's eyes were like torches. In the dark, he could clearly see the armed jeep with high beams on, rushing at the front. He hugged the huge rock with both hands and bent his body into a bow. Buzz! Link heard the sound of something flying through the air, and then he saw a huge rock fly out. Under the moonlight, the stone was faintly visible. A moment later, Link saw that the lights of the speeding jeeps were in a mess, shining everywhere. After another 2 to 3 seconds, it finally stopped moving. It struggled with all its might and emitted 2 rays of light before completely disappearing. It seems like this stone has a good start. The ancient guardian spoke slowly as he picked up the second stone. His entire body turned into a slingshot, and soon, another stone was thrown. After a few seconds of delay, Link saw the lights of an armed jeep fly up from the ground and spin a few rounds in the air before landing and extinguishing. Clearly, the poor jeep had been directly smashed into the air, and in the end, the car had been destroyed and the people had died. The ancient guardian's throw was quite accurate. He was a typical man of few words. The armed jeeps that were galloping across the desert were also frightened when they saw their comrades' vehicles being smashed not far away from them. They began to urge the drivers to start moving. At the same time, the machinery faith zealot in the car recorded this information. Weeping Valley, within the range of the divine tree Noxie, long-range stone throwing has been discovered. Range, 2.5 kilometers. Current number of locked-on targets, 1. After he finished typing the message, he clicked send and the data was transmitted in real time to the mechanical city in the Goria Grand Canal. These mechanical zealots had been temporarily strengthened by the mechanical pioneers, so they could quickly send messages to the city. After defeating the Shandu Air Force formation, the Desert Coalition forces continued to carry out long-range fire attacks on the targets within the range. Then, they sent the tanks of the Wasteland Gang to carry out a few rounds of salvo, and finally, the armed jeeps were dispatched to begin the slaughter of the Shandu troops. After several rounds of attacks, the Inhumans were already scattered, and more than half of the Shandu army and special forces were lost. How could they resist the high-mobility troops in a passive situation? Even though the Shandu army also had armed jeeps, they were not comparable to the enhanced armed jeeps of the Desert Coalition forces in terms of range and strength. Therefore, the mechanical pioneers in the city used their energy to temporarily strengthen all the mechanical zealots and sent them to the Weeping Valley to investigate the Sand City. The rest of the armed jeeps stayed where they were to clean up the battlefield, while the 50 jeeps headed north to collect intelligence. The real-time information transmitted by the 50 jeeps became first-hand information for the Machinery Faith's exploration of Weeping Valley. Weeping Valley. With a few throws from the Ancient Guardians, the enemy entered the front line's ambush area. The Ancient Guardian sighed and finally put down the stone in his hand. "They're too close, I can't do anything." Link patted the Ancient Guardian who was rooted in the blessed land of the Divine Tree. "Don't worry, we'll definitely have another chance to make a move in the future." The strength of the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang was far more than what was in front of them. If he wanted to completely sweep the desert, not only did he have to improve the players' strength, but he also had a lot of work to do. When the zealot of the Machinery Faith discovered the heat signal not far away and told the driver to retreat, many vines suddenly emerged from the ground. The powerful vines climbed up the car and produced a strong grip that forced the jeep to stop. Then, the players and NPCs hiding in the trenches charged out. With a wave of Benjamin's hand, all the soldiers and military dogs of the Special Operations Camp were mobilized. The military dog nimbly dodged the armed jeep and jumped into the car. Immediately, there was a painful scream from the car. Bob held both guns and fired wildly at the incoming jeep. The bullets landed on the windshield in a frenzy. The continuous shots broke the glass, and the bullets landed steadily on the driver. The wasteland mercenary who was driving the car spat out blood and said, "I'll kill you." Suddenly, an even smaller skinny old man walked out from behind Bob. The red robe he was wearing had been rolled up into a short training suit. As Old Turtle gathered his strength, a ball of pure blue energy appeared in his palms. "Bastard, eat my chi cannon." As a blue light wave blasted toward the incoming jeep, the jeep exploded in the next second, and flames soared into the sky. At the same time, flowers bloomed on the battlefield. Alan summoned the god with the sorcerer's mask, and his body expanded to 3 meters, turning into a sorcerer giant. The magicians of the Dasaki Empire also summoned their gods to possess them. Each of them had a malevolent shadow behind them, and their power increased greatly. Under the leadership of the new Earl Simon, the Hidden Alliance used the Blood Clan's secret technique to launch long-range attacks. Simon took the lead and faced the light machine gun's dense bullets. He turned into a pool of blood and swam in the desert before finally landing on the jeep that was charging towards him. A moment later, the enemies wrapped in the blood mist fell from the vehicles one by one. They were as thin as sticks and had no color of blood. Simon licked the corner of his slightly red lips, as if he was reminiscing about the wonderful moment just now. Under the moonlight, he held the trunk of the car and said elegantly, "Another sucking practice." The druids of the Moon Shadow Council, who were wearing black crescent robes, were talking loudly behind them. From time to time, a condensed ray of moonlight would appear in the sky and hit the enemy's head. Some of them were constantly rubbing nature's wrath behind him, as if they had transformed into a long-range machine gun squad. There were even shape-shifting druids who transformed into giant bears and rammed into the jeep, directly knocking the armed jeep over. Link's pets performed outstandingly as well. The hydraulic hippo used its metal head to block the jeep's attack. The front engine of the jeep was crushed into pieces by the hydraulic mouth. The rubber python rushed out of the ground and knocked over the jeep. The obsidian vanguard was also a road bully. It did not move an inch when it collided with the jeep, and the shattered crystals on its body even caused a lot of damage to the enemy in the car. The skeleton wolf pretended to be dead in the sand, and the people in the jeep were immediately hit by deadly bite when they got out of the jeep. They immediately disguised themselves as a pile of bones in the dark, and no one knew. The invisible killer bees, silver army ants, self-destructing flies, and rat secret agents were all fighting in their own ways. The worst was none other than the cameraman, who was filming on the battlefield for the first time. They were timid to begin with, and there was a rain of bullets everywhere. It was fine if they were easily hit by the enemy, but because they were too small, their movements were slow, and they were easily injured by their own people, they were truly dead chickens. In just a short while, 40% of the camera chickens had died, and the rest were disappearing from Link's swarm commander interface at an extremely fast speed. Link stood under the tree of God, his heart filled with emotions. Although the cost of mass production of video chickens was very low, the blood volume of old hens was also very small, and their actions were slow. The success rate of filming and successfully laying eggs alive on the war-torn front line was really low. Could it be that he had to mass-produce thousands of camera chickens to film every big battle in the future? Or, the camera chicken could be improved at a lower cost and overcome some of the current problems? Link fell into deep thought. At this moment, the players climbed out of the trenches like wild dogs and rushed to the front line. Whoever could get more damage and kill would get more rewards when they turned in the quest. The forces from the slums, the special forces, and the Moon Shadow Council were either elites or ranged players, so the damage they suffered was very low. However, the players were not so lucky. In order to get the rewards, they could only rush to the front and deal damage, and many of them became human sandbags, absorbing damage. There were also many who were killed by light machine guns or assault rifles. The Allied forces in the desert and the Shandu city fired at each other. All the data of the mechanical zealot was sent back to the city along with the footage of the battle. The macaw in the trenches flapped its wings and flew in the air. The macaw's heart ached as it watched the video chickens die one after another in the battlefield. In its eyes, these were just fresh old hens. After they died, not only would they lose their lives, but they would also lose their materials and information. It also meant that Lin K's one-week video chicken promotion plan had failed completely. I can't hide anymore. A voice in the macaw's heart told it this. The macaw reduced the amount of flapping of its wings and slowly landed on the ground. It started to caw. The cuckold that was on the battlefield was still captured by the panicking camera rooster, and it ran towards the macaw as if it was in joy. The macaw looked at the camera chicken that was running towards it and couldn't help but stretch out its wings. But in the next second, the macaw's expression froze. In the distance, the light machine gun in the jeep's trunk shot out a few streams of light in the direction of the camera chicken. The first two landed on the ground of the Gobi Desert, and the gravel that flew up hit their bodies. However, the bullets behind him were getting more and more concentrated, and the camera chicken was likely to die in front of him. A golden light flashed in the macaw's eyes and it disappeared from its spot in the next second. It was as fast as lightning in the dark. The camera chicken disappeared from its original spot, and the next moment, bullets landed on the place where it had just been running. Not far away, the macaw reappeared with an old hen between its wings. Ah, no, camera chicken. Since you can't carry out the mission alone, let me help you. The macaw's expression was serious and solemn. Then, it hugged the camera chicken with its wings and raised it above its head before slowly descending. Your lives are about to come to an end. Before she could finish her sentence, the old hen sat on the macaw's head. Then, the macaw pulled the two chicken feet over the metal beak and dislocated the two chicken feet, locking them together. The cameraman was dumbfounded, but he was too touched to move. The head-mounted camera rooster had successfully transformed. And I will be crowned as the photographer of Qinzhuan Studio, Old Jin. Goo 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 goo. Following the macaw's cry, its figure disappeared on the spot again. A golden bolt of lightning flickered on the battlefield and appeared everywhere, recording everything that happened on the battlefield. Link, who was standing under the tree of God to supervise the battle, opened his mouth in shock. He was extremely shocked by the macaw's sudden burst of speed. Link clenched his fists and said in a pleased tone, "Macaw, you said you don't have any special abilities." As the battle progressed, more and more armed jeeps fell. The battlefield was filled with a burning smell, and the Gobi Desert was lit up with flames one after another. From above, it looked like a bonfire party was being held. Retreat! 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 The machine fanatics received the radio signal from the city and immediately shouted to their teammates in the armed jeeps. All the jeeps that were trying to get closer to the front line to gather more information made a 180-degree turn at the same time and accelerated back. The players and slum residents who had been ambushing them for half a day would not let them leave so easily. They chased after them one by one, trying to use their advantages to leave a few jeeps behind. However, the remaining jeeps gradually disappeared into the distance in the desert, accompanied by the fire and the sound of the light machine guns being fired from the back of the jeeps. As the military advisor, Star Constellation appeared beside Link. Looking at the armed jeep leaving, she said worriedly, "The mobility of the armed jeeps of the Desert Coalition Army is still too high. They could still escape more than a dozen Pixiu even when we were ambushing them. If we don't have a mobile force to match them, it will be very difficult for us to take down the desert." Link's gaze was also focused on the jeep that was getting further and further away. Then, his eyes stopped on the night sky in the southeast and he said something meaningful. "Mobility, we'll have it soon. P.S. Please give us monthly votes. I'm begging for monthly votes." Chapter 404 This wave is the Zhuge parrots. Upon hearing the boss's words, Star Constellation's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the boss had foreseen this? Looking at Link's confident and upright back, he gradually grew larger in Constellation's eyes. He was like an unattainable mountain. At this moment, an elite druid of the Moon Shadow Council came over and bowed. "Elder Lin, the 4 commanders of Shandu request an audience." Star Constellation glanced at the owner, Link, and saw that he wasn't surprised at all. He said calmly, "Invite the 4 commanders over." Link glanced at the empty space behind the ancient guardian. He moved his fingers and casually threw a seed in. In the blink of an eye, the seed began to take root and sprout, turning into a shrub at an extremely fast speed, and then into a natural table and chair. The 4 commanders had been to Weeping Valley before. In their memory, this place was an uninhabited desert with not a single blade of grass growing. But now, flat and convenient roads had been built, and the Gobi Desert on both sides of the road had also been planted with drought-resistant plants to stabilize the wind and sand. Meanwhile, in the Weeping Valley in the distance, a divine tree draped with a galaxy and a brightly lit new city rose from the ground. The 4 commanders were dumbfounded. Although they had seen Shenmue City in the news, it had been shot during the day and did not seem to be anything special. However, when the lights lit up at night, the magnificence of the city began to show. When the 4 commanders arrived under the protection of their personal guards, they felt that it was a different feeling from watching from afar. Under the divine tree that covered the sky, silk-like crystals slowly fell from the treetops, flashing as if they were in the Milky Way waterfall. Suddenly, there was a feeling of nature being big and humans being small. "Do you think Link will see us?" Shaditko's commander Dai Yi could not help but ask. Wimbledon's eyes were as big as copper bells, and his face was full of surprise. Link wouldn't be so arrogant that he wouldn't even see her, would he? "What do you think, Mun? You're the closest to Link among us." "It's a small matter," Commander Mun said slowly. "Have you guys thought of what to say after you meet him?" His words made the other 3 choke. They wanted to maintain their current position and not lower themselves, but they also didn't want to lose any power. However, there were many things that they didn't want to think about. The world didn't change according to their will, or else they wouldn't have lost twice. After a while, the elite druid of the Moon Shadow Council returned and led the crowd. "Elder, please enter." The bodyguards behind the 4 commanders also wanted to follow, but they were stopped by the elite druid. The elder said that only Li Zijun is allowed to enter. When the bodyguards heard this, they immediately took out their guns and pointed them at the elite druid. "Protecting the commander is our duty, no one can stop us. It's my duty to listen to the elder's orders. If I can't enter, I can't enter." The elite druid was also quite stubborn and glared at him. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. "Forget it. You guys wait here. Li Zijun alone is enough. I don't think Link will dare to do anything to us." The 4 commanders, as well as Li Zijun, entered the divine tree of Noxie. Soon, they saw Link drinking tea at a wooden table at the end of the divine tree. Behind him was a desert with thick smoke and flames. Commander Dai, who was the most obsessed with war and the protection of Shadu, suddenly felt his heart tighten. He ran forward in a few steps, wanting to see the situation on the battlefield. Dai Yi ran to the edge of the cliff and could vaguely see that the battle on the battlefield had ended. Only a group of people were left cleaning up the battlefield. "Stop looking. They're just here to test the current military strength and defense of Shandu. Most of them have stayed behind. Don't run away." Link took a sip of the tea. It was fresh and fragrant. The tea trees that were nourished by the power of nature tasted even better than the ones in Moro's collection. Dai Yi's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He slammed the table with both hands and said, "We have to catch up with them. Otherwise, if they spread the news back, it would be a disaster for the entire Sand City." "Why are you shouting so loudly?" Link looked up and glanced at Dai Yi. This question made Commander Dai speechless. He suddenly realized the purpose of his visit today and the reality of the situation. Commander Dai was too anxious about the war situation, so he spoke without thinking. "Please forgive him, Mr. Lin," Commander Mun said. Link sat firmly on the wooden stool, with no intention of getting up. On the other hand, the 4 commanders were like subordinates reporting their mission, and their status was immediately determined. Link's eyes swept across the room. His expression was different from the cheery one he had in the military meeting. Right now, he was surrounded by a low pressure and his expression was extremely serious. "I'm afraid that you guys didn't come here so late at night just to collect the defeated soldiers, right? If you have anything to say, say it." The 4 of them were stunned for a moment before their gazes landed on Commander Mun. Lin Ke wanted to laugh. Perhaps they were still hot-blooded, middle-aged men 20 years ago. However, too long of peace had become a hotbed of corruption. They had been deeply trapped in power, and their every move was like a marionette, driven by fame and fortune. "The reason we came this time is, firstly, to gather our defeated soldiers, and secondly, to worry that the machinery faith will take advantage of the great defeat to come and check out the situation. I just didn't expect it to come true." Commander Mun was in a low mood. The machinery faith had already grasped the situation at the front line, and based on the losses, they could more or less figure out the combat strength of Shandu. Crying Valley would probably turn into a sea of fire on the front line again, just like 20 years ago. As soon as Commander Mun finished his sentence, the victorious pets returned. The macaw walked at the front with a camera rooster on its head. It walked up to Link valiantly. "Pet team, successfully completed the mission." For Link's pet team, this battle could be considered a great victory. Basically, all the members were out and killed a lot of enemies without a single pet being injured. It was a veritable battlefield harvester. Lin Ke was very satisfied with the performance of the pet team. Basically, every pet had displayed their strengths. This battle was fought beautifully. This was especially true for the macaw. It had been acting mysteriously recently. Even though it had activated its power, it had hidden it very well and had not been discovered by Link at all. At the last moment, it had merged with the camera chicken and successfully maintained its first camera mission. Link nodded and gestured for them to wait. He then continued his conversation with the 4 commanders. Since the 4 commanders already know what they want to know, you can rest assured, right? The enemy will definitely continue to probe the border of Shandu, Commander Wimbledon immediately said. I'll have to trouble you to look after them, Mr. Lin. Before Link could say anything, the macaw was already fuming with anger. He stood up with his wings on his hips and pointed at Commander Wimbledon. I thought you would have a good opinion of my master as the commander of Shandu City. I didn't expect you to make such a joke. I have something to say, please listen. Back when General Alongso was still around, the Sand Capital was one of the 3 special cities of the Freedom Federation. It dominated the west and intimidated the desert. However, ever since General Alongso's death, Sidu had declined and was in chaos. The desert machinery and the wasteland rose one after another, trying to take over Shandu in collusion. However, in the imperial court, Rottenwood was an official, and in the palace, beasts ate wealth. As a result, the wolf's heart and dog's generation were aggressive in the court, and the disciples of the slave's face and knees were in charge of politics. To cause the country to fall into ruins, and the common people to suffer the pain of suffering. On the other hand, what has Commander Win Leighton done? Once, we decided to send our soldiers to the front line to build a defense, but it was destroyed by the enemy and countless soldiers were killed. After that, we didn't reflect on our actions and sent our soldiers to the front line again. This caused thousands of our soldiers to die in vain on the battlefield. Our Sand City's foundation of 40 years was halved in one day. This action was akin to helping a rebel and colluding with the usurp of the throne. This sin is so great that the heavens and earth cannot tolerate it. Commander Wimbledon was dumbfounded. Just as he was about to explain, he was stopped by the macaw again. Zhen Zhen, shut up. Shameless old thief. You don't know that the people of Shandu are willing to eat your flesh alive, so how dare you speak here? Since you're a toady official, you can only hide your head and live for food and clothing. How dare you call yourself a wise man in the military committee? Arrange the tactics. You don't have much time left and you're about to die. How will you have the face to see General Alongso then? You've lived in vain in your 50 SIXS, you've never made any contributions in your life, you only know how to wag your lips and stick out your tongue, helping the evildoer. A dog with a broken spine, and you still dare to bark in front of my master. I have never seen such a shameless person. The macaw's long-winded speech stunned everyone present. After counting the many shortcomings of General Wimbledon, his momentum was extraordinary. General Wimbledon's face was flushed red as he pointed at the macaw, his lips trembling. Why you? The macaw placed its wings on its waist and said, You what you? You have no shame and you still have the face to refute. Finally, I'll scold you on behalf of the people of Shandu. Your mother's vegetable prices will definitely increase by double tomorrow, your grandpa will be pointed at when he plays chess. You won't get a 7 when you play 3456, your grandma won't get the center position when she square dances, your dad will fire firecrackers when he plays mahjong, and your grandma's hands will be hurt when she gets stitches. As soon as he finished speaking, General Wimbledon let out a blood-curdling scream, spat out a mouthful of blood, and fell to the ground. P.S. Update if you're late. This chapter is really hard to write. Wanjun is going to sleep. Please continue to ask for monthly votes. Chapter 405, The Right to Release the Troops with a Cup of Wine. The macaw's crazy attack directly made General Wimbledon vomit blood and faint. When the other 3 commanders heard this, they also felt like scolding themselves again. Their faces were red with shame, and they stood uneasily. They kept feeling that the group of pets beside them were staring at them with strange eyes. The macaw raised its wings and took a step back. It quickly tried to clear its name. I only opened my mouth to give a detailed account of what he had done. I didn't have any physical contact with him. You have to prove this to me. Don't think that just because you're the commander of the Air Force, you can spit out blood and blackmail people at will. Commander Win Leighton, who was still conscious on the ground, heard this and blood spurted out of his mouth like a fountain. Link rubbed his temples and said, "That's enough. I'll punish you later for interrupting rashly and angering Commander Win Leighton's mistake." With that, Link took a beam of moon essence from the Tree of God, Noxie. The misty waterfall of moon essence had now gathered into a wisp of crystal, like a flexible water snake, spiraling down from the crown of the tree and flowing into Commander Wimbledon's mouth, nourishing the angry and boiling Commander Wimbledon bit by bit. After a few minutes, Commander Wimbledon's breathing calmed down. His numb and tense facial muscles gradually eased, and his ferocious expression melted like ice. Li Zijun helped Commander Wimbledon up. He had just woken up. The recovery ability of the Moonwell water was amazing. Even the old illnesses and internal injuries left behind in his youth had been cured. The clear-headed Wimbledon already understood Link's intentions. The macaw had stood out without any warning to condemn him in speech and in writing. How could this be possible without Link's permission or permission? Win Leighton pointed at Link, who was drinking his tea, and said through gritted teeth, "Young man, I advise you to take care of yourself." Link, however, maintained his elegant and polite smile. He said to the elite druid beside him, "Commander Wimbledon was anxious just now and has just recovered a little. He is still a little delirious and is not suitable to participate in the upcoming military committee discussion. You should take Commander Wimbledon to have a good rest first. Don't neglect him." Hearing Link's words, the other three commanders broke out in cold sweat. They knew very well that Commander Win Leighton was about to be removed from the list. However, on second thought, Link had always been trying to stop a large-scale confrontation. It had always been Commander Win Leighton who had incited them to fight head-on. Now that the Shandu army had been defeated twice, both the people and the soldiers of Shandu needed an explanation. And Wimbledon was the best scapegoat. After thinking through this, the three of them quickly reacted. "You really should take a good rest, Win Leighton," said Commander Tekode as he stepped forward. "You were too anxious because of the failure in commanding the front line. You blamed yourself too much and your body couldn't recover. What you need to do now is to recuperate and not worry about the war." The Mun Kingdom's commander was also exceptionally ruthless when it came to adding salt to the wound. He had even thought of a reason and directly put the blame on Wimbledon. "You're the oldest among us, and I can't take this battle. For the sake of the current fragile military and political system in Chitu, please take a break. We can't afford to experience any more turmoil." The army commander, Fernandez, said with a pale face. Wimbledon was dumbfounded. This series of events had happened too suddenly. He came to see if the front line was held. He wanted to know more about the Desert Alliance army from Link and finally use this method to ease the atmosphere. However, ever since this flat-furred animal started talking nonsense, the pace and development of the matter had gone beyond his control. In just a few words, his position as the Air Force commander and a member of the military committee was dismissed. "Good for you guys." Commander Wimbledon's blood rushed up again. He felt his blood dry up to his head, and he was furious. 4 of the 5 members of the military committee had already spoken. There was no room for negotiation because they all knew that someone had to be responsible for the 2 failures and calm their anger. "Take Commander Wimbledon away. He can't bear the loss of the war, and his emotions are fluctuating too much." Link was the last to speak, and the elite druids helped Commander Win Leighton out of the room. As the curses faded away, Link raised his hand and gestured for the 3 commanders to take their seats. Although Commander Wimbledon's actions are regrettable, it is still difficult to convince the citizens and soldiers with this alone. The biggest headache for me is that the failure of Shandu on the battlefield will definitely lead to an inquiry letter from the Freedom Federation. They know that Shandu is now under the military committee system and will not be easily fooled. What do you 3 think? With that, Link raised his hand. The wooden cups on their tables were filled with tea. The faint aroma of the tea was refreshing and calming. The three commanders fell into deep thought. That's right, it could be said that Commander Wimbledon had misjudged the situation in Shandu, which led to 2 defeats. However, to the Freedom Federation's parliament, such an excuse appeared to be extremely lame. The Freedom Federation's parliament knew that the military and political affairs of the Sand capital had been decided by a vote of 5 council members. Link's name had also taken up a place in Dragon City's and Faye's updated list of strategic key personnel. Such a major action decision was by no means made by Win Leighton alone. At least 2 other committee members would have to take responsibility for it. Army Commander Fernandez's eyes were dazed. He was still immersed in the great grief of losing 60% of his army. Commander Dai and Commander Mun were both astute and calculative, so they didn't dare to express their opinions easily. Since you've brought up this topic, I'm afraid you already have an idea, right? Dai Yi continued to ask. Link smiled. Actually, it's very simple to solve this problem. We just need to tell the public that we feel that the military committee is lagging behind in dealing with problems and daily affairs, so we've chosen a new leader of the Shitu. This leader is Commander Roland. No, I should call him General Roland. The 3 commanders, each with their own thoughts, suddenly had their eyes light up. This was a good idea. This act of bestowing lordship had pushed away all responsibility and left it all to Wimbledon. Furthermore, there was also an explanation for the Freedom Federation. However, after their excitement, their rationality took over the high ground again, and they instantly broke out in cold sweat. They could smell the original intention behind this plan. Link, the dagger is revealed. Once they agreed to this plan, they would clear their own name and at the same time, agree with the setting of only one voice in Shitu. On the other hand, Wimbledon had to pay the price for his loss of mind. He had to take the blame for the 3 of them. Who else but Link could sit on the empty throne of the supreme leader of the Sand City? Link had probably known from the start that the Shitu army would not be able to defeat the allied desert forces head-on. However, Link had indeed told them this. In the end, the 4 of them were still willing to send out their troops and jump into this trap. What to do? If they didn't agree now, they would need 2 people to take the blame. The 3 of them were worried that they would be the ones to be backstabbed. The most important thing was that once the news was made public, the anger of the people and soldiers in Shandu would pour out, and there would be no chance of turning things around. Should he take a gamble, or should he secure Link's position and keep his last trump card? Link sat on the stool with his legs crossed. He placed his palms on his knees and tapped his legs rhythmically with his fingertips. I know. This is an important decision. The 3 of you can think about it carefully and slowly. You must consider it carefully. Link's tone was light, but every word struck the 3's hearts like 1,000 pounds. Star Constellation, who was standing behind Link, had a glint in her eyes. The boss said the gentlest words, but there was a hidden sharpness in his words. He wasn't willing to be a member of the military committee. He wanted to take advantage of the defeat in Shandu to seize the highest power in the city. Star Constellation was overjoyed to be with such a boss who had strength, ideas, and stratagems. Although the previous boss, Morose, was also a formidable character, compared to the situation of the 3 kings, Moro's main influence was in the economy. He had always been low-key and behind the scenes. Morose was like a meticulous tiger. Unfortunately, he met a more aggressive and radical rule-breaker, Link. The macaw, which had just glowed in a crusade, had already blended into the crowd of pets. It used its wings to support the camera rooster above its head, then shifted horizontally in search of the best shooting angle. He saw a dazed old hen moving up and down among the pets, looking so conspicuous. However, no one noticed what was happening at the anxious tea table. Li Zijun, who was in charge of the security of the 4 commanders, could only put her hands behind her back and stand upright by the tea table, fulfilling her duty as a bodyguard. However, the contents of the discussion between the 4 members of the military committee were also frightening. Judging from the current situation, there was a high probability that a new leader would be born in Shandu. On one side was the commander she was loyal to, and on the other side was her close friend. The only thing Li Zijun could do now was to wait for the results. Time passed by, and every second was extremely difficult for the three commanders. General Alongso's death was a pleasant surprise for them. It activated their ambitions and gave them the opportunity to touch the highest power in Shandu. However, Link's appearance was like a tall wall, blocking them from entering. Now, once they agreed, it meant that they would respect Link as the supreme commander of the Shitu and return to his original position. But if they didn't agree, Link, who controlled the economy and the window of public opinion in Shandu, would only need to casually leak some news. The anger of the people and the disappointment of the soldiers would be enough to destroy their reputation and cause them to be consigned to eternal damnation. Commander Dai's forehead was covered in sweat. As the leader of the special forces, who needed the means and plans the most, he spent most of his time thinking about the situation and the people's hearts. Only by understanding people's hearts could one be a qualified special agent and intelligence personnel. Compared to the other three divisions, the Special Intelligence Division had a higher requirement for the psychological game of intelligence personnel. Of the three people who made the decision at the moment, only 40% of the Fernandez army was left, so he had no right to speak. The only thing he could do was to go with the flow. The remaining commander of the fox hunting special forces was the most well-informed one. After all, his son, Benjamin, had a close relationship with Link. Not only was he the secretary of the military, but he also held the real power of the deputy battalion commander of the special forces. In addition, Li Zijun, the captain of the fox hunting special forces. Even if they chose to retreat at the peak of their career, these items would still be handed over to Benjamin and they would still be in the Mun family's hands, so there was no loss. He was the only one who needed to make a decision. However, this was not good news for Dai Yi. Time passed by. Only the sound of Link sipping tea and slamming it onto the table could be heard. Commander Mun was calm and relaxed after he thought it through. Fernandez did not have any bargaining chips on the table. Losing 60% of the army was not just a serious injury. If there was no reasonable and convincing explanation and handling of this matter, the remaining 40% of the army would most likely be disunited, and he would become the commander of the army. Therefore, he didn't have any right to speak and could only wait for the other two to make a decision. After a long time, Commander Dai let out a breath of turbid air and sighed softly, as if he had reconciled with himself and made up his mind. Dai Yi picked up the tea on the table that was brewed with the essence of the divine tree dew and drank it in one gulp. I think that you're doing a great job in managing the economy of Shadu, Mr. Lin. He led by example to guard the Weeping Valley, fended off the enemy at the first opportunity, built Shenmu City, and established the Military Intelligence Department. All of these are great events that benefit the country and the people, and he has great foresight in this war. I think he is the only one qualified to be the Supreme Commander of Shandu. I also think that only Mr. Lin can turn the tide, Commander Mun said. Fernandez followed him and raised his hand. I agree. Link was taken aback. He quickly waved his hands and said, I'm still inexperienced and I don't have a single soldier. I can't be the Supreme Commander of Shandu. Without waiting for the other three commanders to speak, the macaw, which had been hiding among the pets, suddenly jumped out. It stood with its wings on its hips and straightened its back, then started spitting at Link. Link, I'm very disappointed in you. The macaw's first words were heavy. The Desert Alliance army is eyeing us covetously, and this time they are preparing their troops to sweep through Shadu. As the Minister of Economy in Shandu, the Lord of the Slums, the President of Lin's Consortium, the Honorary Director of Shandu Library, the Elder of the Moon Shadow Council, the Tent of the Special Operations Camp, the Member of the Military Committee, and the Director of the Military Intelligence Department, you're not thinking of taking the responsibility to protect the country and the interests of the people, and you're here to decline your obligations again and again. It's really disappointing. I think that if the people of Shadu knew that the omnipotent Mr. Lin in their hearts was like this, they would be extremely disappointed. Rather than defending Shandu, why don't we disperse and escape? As for what you said about not having a single soldier, millions of people in Shandu are willing to stand on your side, and the soldiers of Shandu will always remember the generous rewards you have received. Because Shang clan had a good business environment, they did not exploit them, and were extremely respectful to you. I don't believe that no one will support you if you raise your arms and call for them. You've also let down the three commanders' expectations of you. Since they're willing to elect you as their supreme commander, how could they not listen to your orders? Are you saying that the remaining soldiers of the four armies in Shandu are not human in your eyes? As soon as the macaw finished speaking, the other three commanders saluted in unison. The Special Hunter Force of Shandu. Shandu Army. The Shitas Special Forces. I'm willing to listen to General Lin's orders. P.S. Squid released a new book today. Wanjun went to take a look. It's also in the Wasteland style. Although it's only 2 chapters, the company's system of distributing wasteland resources when there's a shortage is so real. After reading it, she became autistic. The gap was too big. I hope Wanjun can become an author like Squid in the future. I strongly recommend you to read it. Night Ember. Chapter 406 The Supreme Commander of Shandu. After the macaw finished speaking, it jumped back to the pile of pets quietly, trying to turn invisible. Unfortunately, it was the most conspicuous one in the pile of pets with the old hen on its head. Link stood up. 30% of the embarrassment on his face was an act, 40% of his excitement was real, and 30% of his determination was all fake. Everyone's words woke me up from a dream. Since it concerns the lives of millions of people in the Sand Capital, I, Link, will not shirk my duty. In the future, I'll have to ask the 3 commanders to give me some guidance. Link picked up his cup and drank it all. Commander Mun also sipped his tea. After making his decision, the pressure on him was lifted and he looked much more relaxed. Now that we've confirmed General Lin's identity as the Supreme Commander of Shandu, I think we should release the news as soon as possible to stabilize the morale of the army and deal with the inquiry letter from the Freedom Federation. I suggest that the inauguration ceremony be broadcast live in the entire desert. It would be best if we can confirm it by tonight. Now, the 3 of them had established their identities, sworn their allegiance over tea, and relieved themselves of their military power. Just as Link was about to say something, the macaw ran over with a phone in its hand. It shouted into the phone, "Hello, Penny? You heard the discussion just now, right? Hurry up and make arrangements." On the other end of the phone, Supervisor Penny's eyes lit up when he heard this exciting news. He said excitedly, "Don't worry, I'll make the arrangements right away. Give me half an hour." After hanging up the phone, Supervisor Penny trembled with excitement, and he began to mumble to himself uncontrollably. When the boss was the Minister of Economy and the boss of the slums, Lin's consortium could control almost all the industries in Shandu. Now that the boss is going to officially become the Supreme Commander of the Sand Capital, the entire Sand Capital will be the Lin family financial group's back garden. In the future, our business can expand to other parts of the Freedom Federation. Penny looked at the map of Wasteland Planet behind him and grinned. From now on, Lin's financial group's business territory will begin to expand outwards. Weeping Valley, Divine Tree. The macaw hung up the phone and ran back into the pet pile without a trace. Link looked at the camera chicken among the pets and shook his head with a smile. He didn't understand why the macaw was so active today. It also had amazing eyesight. First, it scolded Wimbledon and then rebuked Link. It was the black face twice and urged the 3 commanders to hand over the military power. Finally, it contacted Supervisor Penny to confirm the live broadcast and the promotion. It appeared just at the right time. If not for Zhuan's rap like blabbermouth, Link would have thought that this guy was possessed by something. General Lin, in the 2 battles, the Shandu army has suffered heavy losses. According to what you said before, if the enemy continues to harass us with mechanical attacks, what should we do? Commander Dai's status changed very quickly, and he quickly focused his attention back on the battlefield. There weren't many mobile troops in Shandu, and a lot of armed jeeps, armored vehicles, and tanks were lost in this battle. Even the Inhumans who were previously proud of them were like wheat waiting to be harvested in front of the armed jeep. Under the intense firepower, they fell one after another and became cannon fodder. If the enemy used a team of armed jeeps with high mobility to harass them every day, it would be very difficult to get out of the sand. This problem will be easily solved in a few days, so don't worry. The most important thing now is to send the news of our defeat back to Shandu and stabilize the situation. Don't worry, General, we will do our best to cooperate. The three commanders said in unison. Now that they had lost their military power, if they didn't unite by Link's side, they would soon be idle at home with the excuse of resting and be completely powerless. Then we'll be busy tonight. Link said meaningfully. The entire Shandu was in a hurry overnight. The news that the front line had suffered another defeat was sent back to the city, and the citizens who saw the troops gather and drive out of the city at night were in a panic. I heard that the army that set out this time was defeated. The 10,000-man army advanced at night, but they fell into the enemy's trap. I heard that less than 10% of them returned, and there are piles of corpses outside Weeping Valley. Ah! He was defeated again? How could he lose? Isn't Link in the military committee? There are so many Inhumans there. I heard that Link had a different opinion about this event, but he was alone in the military committee, so he quit a week ago. He's been playing in the Sand City with his pet every day. It must be their sense of superiority. They don't think highly of Link's background and are trying to suppress him. This group of trash is making the people of Shandu panic. Can they still stay here? Alas, if things continue like this, I'm afraid that the fall of Shandu is only a matter of time. We might as well pack up and retreat as soon as possible. I heard that if the Desert Coalition forces attack the city, they will either be captured by the Wasteland Gang as slaves or captured by the Machinery Faith as human batteries. I'm done. I'm going home to pack my things. Many citizens had the idea of running on thin and soft ground, and this feeling seemed to be able to spread through the air. The whole of Shandu was filled with worry and uneasiness at night. There were more violent activities. Mina and her underlings patrolled the slums all night without stopping. After midnight, the usually quiet streets were filled with cars trying to escape north. There were also quite a few people who left on foot with their backpacks. They had no destination or detailed plan. Their only thought now was to leave Shandu. Fear spread out and spread with the continuous honking of the vehicles. Just as people were leaving Shandu in a panic, all the big LED screens in the city and the speakers that covered the streets showed the figure and voice of the #1 host of Shandu TV station, Nicole. The people walking on the road couldn't help but stop when they heard this familiar yet strange voice. The large projection on the surface of the building, the LED screen on the outer wall of the shopping mall, and the broadcast in the slums were all filled with this woman's voice. Hello, everyone. I am Nicole. Now, I have a special report on the Weeping Valley. Mr. Link, the Minister of Economy, member of the Military Council, Director of the Military Intelligence Department, and President of the Linz Consortium, would now serve as the Supreme Commander of the Military and Political Affairs of Shandu. The former Supreme Commander of the Military and Political Affairs in Shandu, Commander Wimbledon, was supervising the battle on the front line. After hearing the news of the second defeat, he couldn't take it and vomited blood and fell unconscious. After waking up, he took full responsibility for the defeat of the army and resigned. The members of the military committee voted urgently to appoint Link as the new Supreme Commander of the Military and Political Affairs in Shandu, Qian. Nicole's tone was firm. Coupled with the fact that Shenmue City was in the background, the credibility of the news was even higher. The passers-by and citizens were still puzzled. Wasn't a military committee established, and Shandu would hold a committee vote and share control? Since when did Air Force Commander Win Leighton become the Supreme Commander of Shandu? As Nicole continued to report, the truth of the matter gradually came to light. It turned out that the committee deeply felt that the voting system was lagging behind, so they voted for the oldest commander, Commander Wimbledon, to be the temporary supreme commander of Shandu. In addition to the live report, there was also a scene of Commander Wimbledon's eyes tearing apart as he pointed in the distance and vomited blood. The perspective was switched again, and the scene of the armed jeeps of the desert forces shooting at them was seen. Finally, with Link as the supreme commander and the other 3 commanders as support, the new leadership of the Sand Capital appeared. Link gave an important speech, Unity of Will, Resistance Against Foreign Enemies. He said that as long as the desert extremists were not eliminated, he would defend the Weeping Valley. The other 3 commanders also expressed their desire to assist the Supreme Commander in protecting Shandu. After watching the interview, the pedestrians on the road were stunned for a long time. After a while, many people turned around and walked back. F***ck, Link's in charge, so what's the point of running? Go home and sleep. Link had officially become the Supreme Commander of the Shandu. In addition, he also had the Lin Group, which controlled the economy of the Shandu, and the forces in the slums. The idea of escaping to Shandu was dispelled by this piece of news, and almost 99% of the people chose to go home to catch up on sleep. As for the remaining 0.1, they were basically gathered in the underground black market and the Platinum Hotel. The underground emperor, the good guy Derek, couldn't sit still after seeing the news. The Platinum Hotel had sent out the highest level information to Link. Now that Link had become the king of the Sand Capital and his black market was right under their noses, how could he not panic? Link had even dared to barge into the city of Mech. He would definitely raise the underground black market and the Platinum Hotel to the ground. Derek worriedly took out a straight phone from the Pure Lead safe and dialed a number. The next morning, Link felt the sunlight shining on a corner of his blanket. He slowly opened his eyes and immediately checked the system. In the system, the 4 titles of Shandu Special Forces Battalion Commander, Shandu Military Council Member, Shandu Minister of Economic Affairs, and Shandu Military Intelligence Division Director had disappeared and were replaced by a new identity, Shandu Supreme Commander. Phew, it's not a dream. After checking his new title a few more times, Lin K finally heaved a sigh of relief. What had happened last night was too intense. From resisting the Desert Coalition Army to becoming the Supreme Commander of Shandu without a single drop of blood, and then to stabilize the situation in Shandu, interviews and work arrangements had been made. When they returned to Howling Castle after everything was done, it was already 5 in the morning. You're awake so early? I was going to wake you up. Just as Link was in a daze, the macaw appeared in the bedroom. It was carrying a silver plate on one wing and a face towel spread on the other. It was wearing a tight black suit with a red bow tie around its neck. It looked like a hotel attendant. Link rubbed his eyes and yawned. This isn't your style. Could it be a side effect of using your ability yesterday? The macaw's face was filled with black lines, but it still took a deep breath to suppress its anger and replied, "Your status is different now. You're the Supreme Commander of Shandu, so you must have a decent secretary who's responsible for your daily life. And looking at all of your subordinates and pets, who else can have lightning-like running speed and excellent eloquence besides me?" The macaw put down the towel and plate, flapped its wings on the top of its head, and put on a pose that it thought was handsome. Link shuddered at the thought of the macaw's big muzzled skill. If the macaw were to wake him up every day, he would definitely be mentally exhausted. Then you'll be my secretary from now on. As for the tasks in the morning, it's better for me to get a talking plant to place here. You have to use your precious time to help me deal with government affairs. Link also rejected the macaw's kind offer in an extremely tactful way. The macaw placed its hands on its hips and laughed. Link, you've already seen the change in me. You're right, I have to spend my limited time on more important things. Getting out of bed is a small matter, you can just plant a potted plant in the bedroom. Link got out of bed, washed up, and went to his office while eating breakfast. He had been busy since yesterday until 5 in the morning, dealing with things so overwrought that he didn't even notice the system's many notifications. He took the opportunity to review them in the morning. The first was the change in status. All the minor identities in the military and government of Shandu were now unified into one line: Supreme Commander of Shandu. Supreme Commander of Shandu, the official leader of Shandu, the highest leader of politics and military, and the will of Shandu. He was the commander-in-chief of the 4 armies, the highest spokesperson, and the leader of the special city of Shandu with a population of 45 million. Next was the change in Link's influence. It went from 10 points to 12 points. Now, everyone in the surrounding satellite cities, towns, and villages knew about it. 12 points. This was the maximum points he could reach for a single city. If Link wanted to expand his influence, he would have to expand it to the entire wasteland. On the other hand, the upper limit of a planet's top influence was 15 points, and the only person who had achieved it was the Wasteland Singer, ally. Other than influence, Link had also gained another specialty after becoming the supreme commander of the Shudu city, the will of the Shudu city. The people of the Shudu city's unyielding will could be fully reflected in Link. Will of Sand City, health points plus 2000, energy points plus 500, charm points plus 10. After looking at the attributes interface, Link entered the missions interface. Since he had become the supreme commander of the Sand City, all the difficulties the Sand City was facing now appeared in the form of missions on his list. Main City Mission: Sand City, eliminate Chen Li. Establishing mission: hint, the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang have been wreaking havoc in Shandu for a long time and are now attempting to annex it. As the Supreme Commander of Shandu, you have the duty to eliminate the scourge in the desert and return the whole Gale Desert to the embrace of Shandu. Mission Reward, Random Specialty, 100000. Experience Points: Activation of Epic Event Heart of the Desert. A Main City Mission, Link's new mission type. It was a quest that would only be available in the later stages of the game when the player occupied a small planet or became a city lord or the leader of a force. After completing the quest, a special event would be activated. Due to the harsh requirements to become the leader of a faction, the complicated quest lines, and the high difficulty of the quests, very few players completed them. Link remembered that in his previous life, after entering the universe, this person was doing a proxy mission on a planet. He accidentally activated a special mission to lead the slaves against tyranny. In the end, he was unanimously chosen as the leader by the slaves on the planet and was given the title Slave Liberator. Link looked through the system again but did not find any new records. As soon as he shut down the system, Link saw the water in the teacup on the table rippling outward. The earth was shaking. He got up and walked to the balcony. Looking out, a dark mass of creatures had appeared in the Gobi Desert. They were clearly divided into 2 groups and were rushing towards the Weeping Valley. P.S. Please give me your monthly ticket. Wanjun thanks you. 407 Wasteland Wolf Mount: first come, first served. The 100,000 wild wolves had returned after the battle in the Gobi, chasing away creatures that were several times their number. Link looked at the spoils brought back by the 100,000 wolves and smiled. They were back, they were all back. When the 100,000 wasteland wolves had appeared at the end of the desert, the sound of their footsteps had resounded throughout the desert. Even the players and NPCs in the distant Divinewood City had been alarmed. This time, apart from the 100,000 wild wolves, there were also hundreds of thousands of other creatures that had been driven over. Link stood on the balcony and looked at the wild animals. They kicked up dust as they ran, spreading across the sky. It was as if a huge sandstorm was coming from the distance. It was a spectacular sight. The stomping sounds of hundreds of thousands of creatures combined into a thunderous sound that reverberated in the sky. Oh my God! The wasteland wolves have driven so many wild beasts back? This scene is too spectacular, we need to film it. After saying that, the macaw turned around and left the office. A few seconds later, it appeared on the balcony again with a camera rooster on its head. Ever since he put on the camera rooster the day before, the macaw seemed to have discovered a new world. In the news report that Link had become the supreme commander of the Shitu, the video he had taken of General Wimbledon vomiting blood in anger had also become excellent evidence. The edited video proved that General Wimbledon's command had failed, and the front line had been defeated. Even most of the soldiers at the air base believed the words on the live TV. This made the macaw even more interested in photography and recognized the importance of video recording. In addition, with his newly activated speed ability, he could also flap his wings and fly. With the camera rooster, he could shoot in any environment without losing any details. Link entered Bug Commander mode and immediately controlled the Wasteland Wolf to spread its wings to both sides. It formed an arc and surrounded the wild animals, forcing them to the bottom of the Weeping Valley. After that, Link returned to his office and immediately called the Military Intelligence Office. Ren Yi, I have a huge project mission now, and I need Inhumans to mobilize their forces. Just as Link was making the call, the players in Shenmue City heard a thunderous sound. They stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. However, there was nothing unusual in the sky during the day, and the sound seemed to be coming from the east of the Tree of God. The quick-witted players recalled a similar scene that had occurred during the construction of the Azure Wood Manor and immediately realized that the 100,000 wolves had returned. The moment Link became the commander of the Sand Capital, the 100,000 wolves returned. It was clear that he wanted to get rid of the Machinery Faith and Wasteland Gang in the desert once and for all, getting rid of any future problems. After the macaw finished filming, it returned to the balcony of Howling Heights Castle and couldn't help but sigh. If we can broadcast the video of the wild wolf's return to the TV station, it will definitely play a role in appeasing the citizens of Shandu. Just these 100,000 wolves alone are more than enough to deal a blow to the Gale Desert, right? Link's original plan was to run. However, after listening to the macaw's words, a new idea suddenly burst out in his mind. Perhaps he could combine his previous plan with the macaw's suggestion. Old Jin, I'm going to have a video conference with the Freedom Federation later. There's something I need you to do. Link, so. After the macaw heard this, it was dumbfounded. After a while, she recovered from her shock and stared at Link. You're the ruthless one. You're trying to use a wild wolf to make several times the profit. I'm guessing that Penny will like your plan. Link patted the macaw's shoulder and said, Don't be humble. You have a part to play in this plan. All right, I'm going to the meeting now. Hurry up and do what I told you to do. The macaw stood there in a daze with a lonely expression. I'm not clean anymore, Ying Luo. Lin Ke quickly arrived at the video conference room with a laptop and a silver thermos in his hands. The news of the second defeat in Shandu and the emergence of a new leader had reached Dragon City and Fa Ye one after another. In view of the extremely unstable social situation and external factors in Shandu, the Freedom Federation Council had submitted an application in advance in the early hours of the morning to hold a video conference of the Freedom Federation's leaders from the three sides in 3 days to evaluate and discuss the current situation in Shandu. Shandu bordered Dragon City and Day. Once the Sand City fell into the quagmire of war, the south of Dragon City and the west of Fei would be exposed to the Machinery Faith and Wasteland Gang. At that time, Dragon City and Fei would encounter the dilemma of a war on both sides. Therefore, in order to avoid such a situation, they needed to evaluate the current situation in Shandu and decide whether to send reinforcements. Today, Link needed to discuss countermeasures and procedures with the 3 commanders in the city. Link turned on the video conference equipment and the faces of Mun Kingdom, Dai Yi, and Fernandez appeared on the screen. Since everyone is here, I'll say a few words first. After the meeting is over, all 3 divisions will select a group of soldiers with riding and shooting experience and send them to Shenmue City. I have my own arrangements. The 3 commanders didn't know what Link was playing at, but they took note of it and immediately ordered their secretaries to make arrangements. In the next video conference, Link focused on asking about the arrangements for the video conference between the three leaders and listening to the three commanders' briefing on the current situation of their respective troops. Through this meeting, Link had a more detailed understanding of the current military strength and equipment in the Shadow. The Air Force's report was made by the Ground Force Commander, Fernandez. There were 2,000 members of the Fox Hunting Special Force, 4,000 members of the Army, and 1,500 intelligence personnel and spies registered by the Special Forces in Shandu. The Air Force was in service and had a total of 300 people in logistics. They had 15 reconnaissance planes, 15 Raptor fighters, and 1 long-range bomber. After looking at the data, Link knew that the two operations had suffered heavy losses. The army of 10,000 had been reduced to only 4,000, and the Fox Hunting Special Forces and Special Forces had also lost more than 1,000 people. These were non-renewable NPCs, and it would be extremely difficult to repair them after they were lost. If it wasn't for Link's control over the Sand City being the highest in history, they wouldn't even be able to maintain the Sand City, let alone deal with the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang. It was no wonder that Dragon City and Far Night, who were thousands of miles away, were so anxious. According to their assessment, if they were to encounter the siege of the Machinery City and the Wasteland Gang, the final result would be to retreat to the Sand City and use the complex terrain of the Sand City to carry out guerrilla warfare. However, by that time, the entire Sand City would be razed to the ground and reduced to ruins. The Mun Kingdom's commander was a calm elder and had deep insight in the military. Army Commander Fernandez had lost all his energy after losing more than half of his army. He had become a tool to supervise the four armies in Link's place. As for Commander Dai, he was more like Link's advisor. He was in charge of developing tactical plans and macro-level theories. At the end of the meeting, Commander Dai could not help but ask, "General, there are only 3 days left before the three-sided summit. With the current military strength and equipment of Shandu, Dragon City, and Fei will definitely take the opportunity to ask for reinforcements. At that time, the sovereignty of Shandu will be challenged. I suggest that all the forces in the slums join the army first and temporarily expand the number of troops. Don't give Dragon City and Far Night an excuse to send troops." The Mun commander had a grave expression as though he recalled something from the past. That's true. Once Dragon City and Fei entered Shandu, their troops would not be under the general's control and would have the right to act independently, and after defeating the Desert Coalition, Dragon City and the Magic Knight Society asked us to pay for the military expenses, which is generally composed of military expenses and border land. So in these 3 days, we have to think of a way to expand the army, and not just to make up the numbers. Hearing their suggestions, Link's expression showed that he understood. "It's fine. Just do as I say." 3 days later, not only will Dragon City and Fei not be able to find an excuse to send out their troops, but the front line will also welcome a great victory. The three commanders were all shocked. This was not the first time they had heard this. Link had said something similar the day before at the Divine Tree, Noxie. However, if they did not recruit new soldiers and replenish the capacity of the troops, how were they going to cope with the summit meeting in 3 days? With the current level of heavy industry in Shadow, mobility was a big problem. There was no way to crack the super mobility of the armed jeep. It was easier said than done to achieve a great victory under such circumstances. After the video conference ended, the big screen instantly turned black. Among the three commanders in the military region's conference room, Dai Yi couldn't help but let out a breath of air. "Sigh, I hope we can successfully deal with the Summit Council in 3 days. What I'm worried about now is that General will not make the same radical mistake as Win Leighton in order to create a great victory." Dai Yi had played it out in his mind many times. It was almost impossible to attack with the army. If it was the Air Force's fixed bombing, it was very likely that the same thing would happen again and they would be shot down by the laser weapons of the Mech City. The only way to win was for Link to personally lead his pets to the front line to wreak havoc. When he thought of this, Dai Yi's eyelids twitched wildly. He had a bad feeling. Fernandez had not yet recovered from yesterday's loss, and his face was as stoic as a robot. The Mun Kingdom scoffed at Dai Yi's pessimistic attitude and said, "You still don't know enough about Link." According to Li Zijun and Benjamin, Link is someone who would not act unless he is completely confident. Since he said that there will be a great victory in 3 days, then this great victory will definitely happen. You don't have to worry about it. Dai Yi was stunned for a moment and sighed, "I hope so." The news that the supreme leader of the Sand City had been replaced by Link from Wimbledon successfully took over the headlines of the day. It was even more popular than the defeat at the front line in the Sand City. No matter what class the people of the Sand Capital were in, they all believed that as long as Link became the supreme commander, he would definitely lead the Sand Capital through this crisis and towards glory. Link's growth could be seen by everyone in the desert. He had grown up bit by bit. From being a slave to helping the gang leader and defeating White Crane Hall to become the leader of Kylan Hall, to being on equal footing with the other 3 forces in the slums, to unifying the slums, assassinating Moros, taking over the economy of the city, entering the military committee, and now becoming the true leader of the city. With every step he took, he was breaking the rules and people's understanding of the Sand City. He had the looks, the strength, and the means. From the very beginning, he was the one with the lower status, the one with the stronger status. In half a year, he completed the big change in his status and became one of the few men with the highest power on Wasteland. Even the inspirational drama of the Shadow TV station didn't dare to film this in half a year, as it would cause the audience to explode. Link's own experience was already a miracle, and the citizens of the Sand City believed that he would create another miracle. In addition to the NPCs of the Sand City, Link had also officially become the leader of the Sand City. This caused a huge uproar among the players. Even the wind-chasing ethereal beauty, Bandit Cool, and explosive chicken became the targets of envy for the other players. These 3 were the closest to Link. They were all members of the Lin Financial Group or under Link's direct command. They were clearly favored by Link after a few interactions with him. In the words of the other players, this was a true rise to the heavens. That was the leader of the Sand Capital. There were only 3 leaders like him in the entire Freedom Federation. There was no need to elaborate on his high status. It could be said that the pace of the plot and major events on the entire Wasteland planet were related to these 3. Even the guilds that were on good terms with Link and wanted to suck up to him were hiding in the villa and laughing wildly. This wave of betting was not off. Just as everyone was bombarded by the bombarding news and gradually forgot about the war on the front line, a new advertisement suddenly appeared on the LED screens and TV advertisements in Shandu. Do you want a powerful mount? Do you want a loyal and reliable comrade? It was as swift as the wind. It was loyal to its own people and cruel to its enemies. If you want to own a wasteland wolf, then quickly come to Shenmue City. We have also prepared a variety of auxiliary equipment for you, as well as an integrated logistics service base, so that you can ride comfortably and feel at ease. In addition, there are a total of 3 types of wasteland wolves for you to choose from, to meet all your needs. The lowest price for a wasteland wolf is only 99,800, and you can bring a wasteland wolf home. Coupled with the passionate advertisement, the wolf in the advertisement, who was baring its fangs and had muscles all over its body, appeared in the field of vision of the players and the residents of Shandu. On the screen, the macaw grabbed the reins and rode on the back of a wolf in the desert. There was also a scene of commanding the wild wolf to hunt, and a first-person perspective, which was extremely immersive. When the players saw the TV commercial, their eyes turned red and they couldn't help but exclaim, F***CK. That's a F***ing mount. A mount. As an extremely important part of a game, it had always attracted the attention of players. In fact, there were even more players who paid attention to mounts than battles. As a basic but also very important module, it was not reflected much in the early stages of the game. The only mounts that normal players could get their hands on were bicycles and electric bikes. High-end players like Wind Chasing Wolf drove sports cars that cost hundreds of thousands of yuan. However, the sudden introduction of the wild wolf today made everyone's eyes light up. This was not only a mount, but also a pet that could participate in battle. At this moment, there was only one line in the minds of all the players: buy it and you'll profit. P.S. For sale, Wild Wolf Mount, 1 ticket per month, first come, first served. Chapter 408 Wolf Rider. Wild Wolves. I was fortunate enough to have constructed Shenmue City. Back then, 100,000 wild wolves appeared, and I can never forget that aura. At that time, we ran over to take a look. The biggest wild wolf in Richard's body was 3 to 4 meters tall. Even a normal-sized wild wolf is more than 2 meters tall. If this thing really pounced at us, I'm afraid that ordinary people wouldn't be able to avoid it. But the price is too expensive. It costs 99,800, which is almost 100,000. If converted to real money, it's more than 180,000. If only I had 180,000 to buy a car in real life, why would I waste it on a mount in the game? It's indeed a little expensive. It's fine if we don't go over to take a look. We can also take a mission from the Military Intelligence Department. The players in Shandu were all eager to try. Whether they wanted to buy the wild wolf or go there to have a look, they were all moving out of the city. There were many roads connecting Shandu and Shenmue City, and there was one every 5 minutes. This road had now become one of the busiest routes in the Sand Capital. Every day, countless resources and goods were being transported to Shenmue City for the use of the natives and Inhumans living there. There were buses going back and forth between the two cities, allowing the population to constantly change between Shenmue City and Shandu City. As for the players of Shenmue City, when they saw the advertisement, they all rushed to the location. Outside Shenmue City's Druid district, a large-scale construction was currently being carried out. This place was the one-stop logistics service base mentioned in the advertisement. There was a small reception area next to the construction site, where many elite druids of the Moon Shadow Council were sitting under the shade, waiting for players to come and ask questions. Next to the reception, there was a wooden ring. Inside the ring, 3 wild wolves of different sizes were enjoying the cleaning service provided by the druid apprentice. "Hello, I'm here to inquire about the purchase of a wild wolf mount." A player ran to the information desk, panting, and not far behind him, many other players also ran over. "May I know what type of wasteland wolf you want? Here's the list of equipment." The elite druid took out a price list with detailed specifications. The wasteland wolf was divided into 3 types, namely the basic version, the advanced version, and the ultimate version. The basic version costs 99,800 wasteland coins, and it will be used for 1 year. The height of the wild wolf, the height of its spine facing the ground, is 1.5 meters, carrying 25 kilograms of weight other than the rider, and its speed is 85 kilometers per hour. Biting, flying. The advanced version costs 129,800 wasteland coins and can be used for 1 year. The wasteland wolf is 1.8 meters tall, it weighs 50 kilograms except for the rider, and its speed is 100 kilometers per hour. Biting, pouncing, howling. The ultimate version costs 169,800 wasteland coins and will be used for 1 year. The wasteland wolf is 2.3 meters tall, and it weighs 100 kilograms except for the rider. It can travel at a speed of 130 km per hour. Bite, pounce, wolf howl, smell search, bloodthirst. After looking at the configuration list, the player named above the finish line was stunned. Not a lifetime buyout, but a 1-year usage right. At the finish line, it meant that it was about to split open. He had already saved up the money, but in the end, he realized that it was a 1-year deadline. He immediately fell into hesitation. In terms of configuration, he only had enough money to buy a basic version, but after seeing the advanced and ultimate versions, he suddenly felt that the basic version he wanted was not as good. Compared to the 3 wild wolves in the wooden circle, the ultimate version was more awesome. Players bought the Wasteland Wolf not only as a mount, but also as a pet to accompany them in battle. Comparing the information of the basic and ultimate version of the Wasteland Wolf, they were simply two different species. The elite druid saw the Inhumans' conflicted expressions and kindly reminded them, if you're short of money and can't pay in full, we've also thoughtfully prepared an installment service for you. We support 3 to 12 installments, which will fully meet your personal needs. This installment plan doesn't generate any interest, and you only need to complete one mission for the Military Intelligence Division for free every month according to the number of installments you choose. The person at the finishing line was dumbfounded. Why did this route feel so familiar? However, when he thought about the 99,800 Wasteland coins, if he divided it into 12 episodes, it would only be 8,317 Wasteland coins a month. It didn't seem unacceptable. According to the exchange rate of the bank's exchange system, the ratio of in-game currency to real money was decreasing every month. If they used the installment payment method, the actual amount of money spent every month would be reduced. As for doing the quests for free, he would definitely have to do the quests after getting the wild wolf. There was only one more quest every month, so he just had to do it without any trouble. He had a mount, and it was such a powerful beast. Although he could only use it for a year, considering the difficulty of the next mission, the difficulty of completing the mission with a pet was obviously lower than doing it alone. After thinking for a moment at the finish line, he gritted his teeth and said, "I'll buy it, give me an advanced version. You'll have to pay in 12 months. Okay, please wait a moment. I'll arrange for your registration immediately." The elite druid was shocked, but he still smiled. These Inhumans were really rich. He made a decision so quickly for something that cost more than 100,000 Wasteland coins. Soon, the elite druid registered and filled in the form. After paying the first payment, he received a small ticket. "Sir, I have to tell you that on the 15th of every month, you need to take the initiative to transfer the money to the account below or pay the fee here. If we find that you are late or have a record of breach of contract, we will reduce your credit rating. The credit rating will affect the mission in Shandu, the difficulty of the Military Intelligence Department's mission, the mission rewards, etc. As long as it is a business under Lin's financial group, your behavior will be restricted." At the finish line, he nodded his head in a hurry. He was not interested in any of this. Now that Link was the leader of the city, no one would be stupid enough to make things difficult for him. If it was really overdue or a breach of contract, he was afraid that he would not be able to survive in the entire Shitu. "You only need to take this bill of lading to the temporary point at the bottom of Weeping Valley to retrieve your wild wolf mount. And because you're the first player to come and buy, we hereby gift you a mount vouchers worth 2,500 Wasteland coins. When you pick up the mount, we will install a saddle, a weight storage bag, and windproof goggles on the spot." At the finishing point, he felt like he had earned a lot. He took the credit voucher and left happily. Then, the other players came to the information desk, and some stood outside the wooden circle to observe the wild wolves. The construction site outside the city suddenly became the most lively place in Shenmue City. Players gathered in circles just to see the peddling site and the 3 versions of the wild wolf. In the end, the information desk was not enough, so the staff simply posted the quotation and the installment request outside for everyone to browse. The high price of the Wasteland Wolf made many players flinch, but after seeing that it could be paid in installments, they were tempted. The guilds that had received the news didn't rush to the scene. Instead, they started analyzing the screenshots they had received on the forums. Zui Feng put down the book in his hand and stood up. "I think we must get the mount this time." Although the unit price was very high, considering that the difficulty of the mission would increase as the level increased, the first problem would be the combat power. "I only have one thing to say about the Wasteland Wolf: anything made by Link must be of the highest quality. I've been by Link's side for a long time. Other than being a scholar, his other trump card is that he can upgrade and modify the wild animals he catches. The wasteland wolf has also been modified, so it's only stronger. Secondly, you can pay in installments this time, which has greatly lowered the entry requirement. For the plot of the Sand City, the next step would be the Desert War. Therefore, whether it was the Machinery Faith or the Wasteland Gang, they were still a distance away from the Weeping Valley. With the Wasteland Wolves, our mobility has greatly increased. We can go to farther places to do missions, and the round-trip speed is faster. The most important thing is that the Wasteland Wolves can help us kill enemies and increase our output. This is much better than buying a few pieces of blue and green equipment. Finally, please take note of the 1-year time limit. When ordinary people saw the 1-year deadline, they would only think that it was so expensive. They had spent so much money on a pet mount, but in the end, they only had the right to use it for 1 year. However, from another perspective, this 1-year period also explains another problem. In the future, there may be more powerful pet mounts with more functions. I won't make any hard requests, but I can give you a solution. Each party of 5 could purchase an advanced version of the Hydra under the name of one person. After installments, they will have to pay about 10,000 wasteland money every month, but each of the 5 of them will get about 2,000. This isn't actually a big number, but it can guarantee that in the 5-man team mission, they will have an extra large mobile bag, a damage pet, and a mount. After Wind Chasing Wolf's detailed analysis, the elite members all agreed with Wind Chasing Wolf's analysis and decided who the pet owner was by drawing lots. Similar scenes were happening in other villas. When the players arrived at the Weeping Valley, they were dumbfounded when they saw 100,000 wild wolves surrounding several wild beasts. Such a powerful and terrifying wild wolf was about to become his mount. He couldn't help but feel excited at the thought of this. After handing in the proof of receipt and vouchers, the elite druid brought an attack-type wild wolf and installed a saddle and a weight-bearing bag on the spot. He also gave a pair of wind-proof goggles to the finish line. From now on, he will be your master. After the elite druid and the wild wolf finished communicating, the wild wolf walked to the finish line, sniffed the druid's body, and carefully remembered his appearance. At the finish line, they could feel the hot air coming out of the mouth of the wild wolf, and they were so scared that they didn't move at all when they saw the yellow fangs that were as big as fingers. It was not until the wild wolf knelt in front of him and motioned for him to sit on it that there was a reaction at the finish line. After that, there was the scene of the wild wolf carrying the players and running wildly in the gobi. The feeling of his heart flying out of his throat at any moment was simply too good. Meanwhile, in the castle, Link grinned as he watched everything that had happened in the Weeping Valley. The macaw stood beside Link and watched as the Inhumans went from trembling to taking control of the Wasteland Wolf. It only took half an hour for them to be able to work together perfectly. Realization dawned on the macaw. So, the way you solved the problem of the Desert Coalition Army's mobility was to let the Inhumans become wolf riders? Using mobility to counter mobility? That's just one of the reasons, Link said calmly. The more important reason is that through the Wasteland Wolves, we can create a constant connection with the Inhumans. When the macaw heard this, it bared its teeth and flapped its wings. It's so corny. I'm getting goosebumps. It was a warning from some time ago. If I can open the Military Intelligence Department, the other commanders can also open similar organizations to make the players work for them. But pets are my advantage. Through the Wasteland Wolf, I can give players an experience that no one else can. Then, their relationship with the Lin Financial Group will be higher than other forces or individuals. The macaw scratched its head and explained everything that Link had said. It's fine that you've opened installments and let Inhumans work for free, but you've even formulated wolf food for Wasteland Wolves, and one pack actually costs 30 Wasteland coins. There was also the one-stop logistics service base, which included the maintenance of the wild wolves, the treatment after injuries, and even the agency service of Inhumans after they left. All of these required money. It looks like I'm taking advantage of you by installments, but in reality, I'll have to spend money on all aspects to buy a gold-devouring beast. Link's lips curled up. This was all part of his plan. But was there a problem? These were all normal items, and the fees were extremely reasonable. Perhaps you've miscalculated a little. When these Inhumans spent a lot of money to rent the wild wolves, the amount of money they had on hand would decrease. After the amount of resources decreases, it will definitely be accompanied by a large number of missions to earn money. At that time, it will also stimulate the Military Intelligence Division's mission completion rate to increase greatly, and ultimately affect my process of recovering the entire desert. The macaw couldn't help but shiver. You're asking the Inhumans to work for you for the rest of your life. Link chuckled. I'm just doing what I usually do. If this plan falls into Penny's hands, he'll play tricks and make the Inhumans pay multiple times the price. Do you believe that he'll still be happy? The macaw thought about Penny's usual style and suddenly wrapped its wings around its fat body. It stared at Link vigilantly and said, "Don't tell me you're going to insult me like this? I could have just sat around and waited for death, but I was triggered by your PUA and felt that my blood horse was useless. Then, I worked hard to improve myself. Not only did I learn photography, but I also self-taught all the secretary courses. In the end, I volunteered to be your assistant. Tisk, you didn't put the design plan and ideas on the office table there on purpose, did you?" Link didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He raised his hands in surrender. "What kind of books have you been reading? You even know about the PUA. In order to hint to you, I paid the price of a genetic mutation potion worth 500,000 wasteland coins. Do you think a black-hearted capitalist would do such a losing business?" The macaw agreed with this explanation and snorted arrogantly, "I'm just a secretary. It's not too much for me to learn some psychology, right? P.S. Readers who have bought the Wild Wolf at the end of the last chapter, please pay one more monthly ticket to sign up for the Wolf Knight's legal road test, thank you." Chapter 409. Once again, the market exploded. The sale of the Wild Wolf mount not only caused a commotion in Sandu, but it also triggered a strong response on the entire wasteland planet. The players of Sandu had been influenced by Link's various tricks and had developed a lot of resistance after seeing the release of the Wasteland Wolf mount. Although he was surprised and happy, he no longer had the exaggerated feeling of having his world view shattered. However, for the players of Dragon City and Magic Knight, such a powerful thing should not have appeared at this stage. Its strength had completely exceeded the level setting. There were many posts about wild wolves on the forum, and you could see 3 different levels of wild wolves by clicking on any post. In addition to the screenshots of the player's detection, more detailed data appeared in front of everyone. Little Wild Wolf. Race, Wolf, Canine. Level, LV12. HP, 700/900. Energy, 150/150. Skills, Bite, Pounce. Description: the top predator of the Gobi Desert, with amazing speed and bite force. If you encounter it alone in the wild, you can just wait for death. The small wasteland wolf, LV12, had 700 HP, the wasteland wolf, LV15, had 1200 HP, and the giant wasteland wolf, LV15 plus elite, had 2000 HP. Not counting the skills, just the HP alone was not something that players at their current level could have. With such a mount and pet, wouldn't he be able to complete the quest with half the effort? If they only looked at the price of the wild wolf, the players from other places could still comfort themselves that not everyone could get it. Ha, she was just a plaything for the rich. However, after seeing the considerate and interest-free installment plan, their hearts ached. Look at how thoughtful the leader of the Sand City, Link, was. He knew that the players couldn't afford that much money, so he used the interest-free installment plan. Players could spend tomorrow's money to buy today's pets, so that they could be one step faster on the road to leveling up. If he compared them to their leader, he would know that they had been biding their time and had only met him a few times. Gee! He was so angry. All in all, the players from Dragon City and Magic Knight were jealous, very jealous. Although they were all born on the Wasteland planet, the players of Sidu had received plenty of missions under Link's influence and guidance. They didn't have to run around. They had a clear advantage in terms of power and average level. Taking the average level as an example, the average level of the players in Shandu was currently at level 14, and the strongest army was trying to reach level 20. On the other hand, the average level of the players in Dragon City and Magic Knight was 13. This level was not to be underestimated. It required 11400 experience points to upgrade from level 13 to level 14. The average level difference was 1 level, but in reality, it meant that he had done dozens of fewer missions. If one player had lost so many quests, how many quests would be lost for hundreds of thousands of players? How much time would be wasted? After thinking about it, players would get together because of the story. No matter what shiny equipment you were wearing, a player from the Sand City riding on a ferocious-looking wild wolf would definitely attract attention. It was extremely domineering. Moreover, in terms of combat, having such a ferocious beast would definitely improve the effects and derived battle tactics. It would definitely be much better than having a full set of equipment of equivalent value. In addition to the players, many nobles uptown also took a fancy to the strength of the wild wolf. In the past, the uptown's nobles had the habit of raising large beasts to show off their status. However, under Link's subtle influence, it had become a competition of who could afford a pig feast, who had a hamster as a pet, and who had a 3-piece security set. The effects were outstanding, and gradually, there was a saying that Link's products are of the highest quality. Now that Link had been promoted to the Supreme Commander of the Sand Capital, the quality of his wolves and beasts was needless to say. When had the Lin Financial Group's products ever been of poor quality? Many of the uptown's influential families drove straight to Shenmue City, ready to buy a pack of wild wolves. Compared to the players, this amount of money was only the price of a pig feast for the influential families. However, if they bought the Wasteland wolves, it would mean that their family was supporting the commander of the Sand City, Link. This would give them the title of supporting the construction of the Sand City and fighting against foreign enemies. Why not? Originally, the players had already made careful calculations when buying the wild wolves. They could not wait to split the 1 yuan into 2 to spend. Now, with the rich and powerful people of Shandu joining the competition, the players suddenly felt that it was a little unbearable. This catfish effect caused some hesitant players to not consider it and hurriedly paid for the bill of receipt. Just as the players and the wealthy merchants of the Sand City were lining up to buy the Wasteland wolves, Link was already carrying out the next step of his plan. The 3 commanders carefully selected 300 soldiers who were good at riding and shooting and sent them to the front line in military trucks. At this moment, the soldiers were all in front of Link. You're all outstanding warriors carefully selected from Shandu, and you've all shown your extraordinary skills on horseback. It doesn't matter what unit you belong to or what number you are. From now on, you will have a new name, the Wolf Riders of the Wilderness. This unit belongs to the Special Operations Battalion under my command, and the Deputy Battalion Commander is Benjamin, who is beside you. Link's tone was calm. With a wave of his hand, the giant wasteland wolves walked in a neat formation. Its huge body and the wild aura it exuded shocked all the soldiers present. When they were riding horses in the past, they had seen many violent wild horses. It was very difficult to tame these stubborn wild horses, but as long as they could endure their struggles, they would be able to successfully control them. The giant wolves in front of him were all over 2 meters in height, and they only reached the height of their backs. When the giant wolf's head was upright, its overall height could reach more than 2.5 meters. Each giant wolf's sharp claws could easily cut open an adult's stomach, revealing their sharp teeth that were more than 10 centimeters long. One bite was enough to pierce through the prey's heart. The muscles on its body were more explosive than the fine northern horses. A wild wolf like this was both a mount and a sharp spear. Now, each of you will come and take a giant wolf. They will remember your appearance, smell, and characteristics. From now on, they will be your most loyal comrades." The soldiers were stunned. In the past, when they trained horses, they had to stay with the horses often to cultivate feelings. Now, he directly took away a giant wolf as soon as he entered the arena. What if he provoked him and got eaten in one bite? It could still resist against a normal-sized wolf, but a giant wolf of this size could probably tear off half of its body with a single howl. However, they had to obey Link's orders. Thus, the soldiers gritted their teeth and braced themselves. They felt as if their legs were filled with lead when they walked, and every step took great courage and strength. However, after getting the reins, the brutal demonstration did not happen. The wolves obediently followed the reins and returned to their original positions. The only thing he did was to sniff his future partner's scent to deepen his impression of her. Some of you have participated in the previous 2 desert wars, and some of you didn't get a chance. However, he should have heard of the horror of the Desert Alliance army from the videos or his military colleagues. Among them, the armed jeep had plenty of firepower and high mobility. On the other hand, Shandu didn't have the corresponding mobility, and they were massacred by the other party on the way to escape, and their army was defeated. Now, it's time to change the situation. The wolf riders of the wilderness, which are you, will be the sharpest blade in the desert. You will carry the most advanced weapons in the desert and ride the fiercest giant wolves in the wilderness to deal a fatal blow to the enemy. The name of the wolf cavalry will be known throughout the whole Gale Desert. Link then patted Benjamin's shoulder and said, "I'll leave the training and equipment to you." Benjamin straightened his back and gave a military salute. "For the sake of Shandu, I'm obliged to do so." After Link left, Benjamin mounted the giant wasteland wolf. "Everyone, follow me to the Goba for training. At night, there will be specialized craftsmen to install armors and bags for your mounts." The soldiers rode on the giant wolves one after another. The giant wolves did not show any signs of irritation or resistance, which made the soldiers who were ready to tame them click their tongues in wonder. The players and NPCs who were lining up to receive their wasteland wolves at the foot of Weeping Valley were filled with anticipation as they looked at the ferocious wolf riders that were charging out of Howling Heights. Even the military had used it, so how could it be bad? Windhowl Castle. Lin Ke was checking the progress of the various projects in his office. Currently, the entire Weeping Valley was undergoing many construction projects. The Matrix server was being built underground. Once it was completed, all the spy mice would transmit the data to the server. The server would become a treasure vault that contained the machinery Faith's technology and plans. Advanced science and technology could be extracted from it, allowing the technology level of Sand City to rise to a new level. The Tokamark Devices core and defense field were also underground projects, not far from the Matrix server, and were currently under construction. Once Dave's research was successful, then the future of Shandu would become a modern city with the tokamak as its main clean energy source, and it would be able to get rid of the constraints of traditional fossil energy. The one-stop logistics service center outside Shenmue City was used as a place for the wolves to recuperate, rest, and manage. It would be responsible for the logistics of all the wolves in the entire Shitu, and had the ability to provide recuperate and rest for tens of thousands of wolves. Of course, there was also the biggest construction project, which was to build a wildlife habitat in the Gobi. Today, most of the military intelligence department's missions were related to this. The wild wolf had been out for nearly a month and had brought back hundreds of thousands of wild beasts. The problem of the survival of these wild beasts needed to be solved. Link started from 2 aspects. On the one hand, he had the players build a power grid for the protected area in the Gobi. On the other hand, he had the druids build oases in the Gobi to improve the environment for the survival of these wild animals. In the next stage of Lin Ke's plan, these wild animals would be of great use. Meanwhile, a new mission appeared in Link's system. Desert Oasis. Main City Quest Shuta Gobi Oasis. Mission Tip: the wild wolves have driven away hundreds of thousands of animals and built a home for the wild animals in the Gobi Desert, allowing them to take root and live. Mission reward, 200000 experience points and the activation of the excellent event abnormal behavior of wild beasts. Just as Link was checking on the progress of the construction, the macaw pushed open the door and entered with a sunflower in its arms. The macaw pointed at the sunflower in its arms and said, "Why is there an extra thing in your bedroom?" Link looked up and saw the sunflower in the pot smiling and swaying from side to side. "Yeah, this is the sunflower alarm clock I synthesized when I came back today. How is it? Not bad, right?" The macaw frowned and stared at the sunflower in its arms with doubt. "This thing can be used as an alarm clock." Her expression seemed to say, "Link, are you taking advantage of my lack of experience? Then I'd like to see how this sunflower sets the time as an alarm tomorrow morning." The macaw turned around as it spoke. Before it left the office, it emphasized, "Don't forget that there's a Freedom Federation's three-sided summit meeting at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow." "Of course I won't forget," said Link, chuckling. "I'd like to see the embarrassed expressions on the faces of the Dragon City and the Magic Knight leaders." Out of the 100,000 wolves, Link rented out 50,000 of them. The rest were left in the Gobi to look after the large number of wild beasts. Within a day, all 50,000 wild wolves were sold out and began to appear in the streets and alleys of Shandu. After wearing a special metal mask, his original ferocious appearance was restrained, but his adult majestic body was revealed without a doubt, which made people feel intimidated. However, with the phrase "everything that Link produces must be the best" as the basis, the citizens of Shandu were more curious than afraid. The people who rented the wasteland wolf found that this pet was extremely intelligent. It could clearly understand their instructions. When there were no orders, it would obediently lie on the ground, more obedient than domestic dogs. The power of the wild wolves was also gradually showing. Whether it was the weight of the mission or the conflict with the machinery faith in the desert, the speed of the wild wolves could even catch up with an armed jeep. Their brutal attack power could easily cause damage to the mechanical zealots or mercenaries. The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, followed by now. Regardless of whether I can succeed or not, since I've chosen to go far, I'll go through wind and rain. It's 7 in the morning. It's time to get up and fight. Link was suddenly woken up by a burst of chicken soup. The next second, he saw a chubby figure wrapped in a cartoon nightgown and a sleeping hat in his room. The macaw scratched the fat on its waist and exclaimed, "This thing, it really can report the time." Link scratched his head. He seemed to have miscalculated. He had combined a language book, an alarm clock, and sunflowers. Who knew that after the combination, he would wake up every day with a few paragraphs of chicken soup for the soul? The reason was that in an inconspicuous position in the language book, there was a sentence of encouraging chicken soup on every page. After the synthesis, it was absorbed by the sunflower without moving. It seemed that he would be tortured by chicken soup every day in the future. Link got out of bed and washed up. Then, he went to the study and slowly ate his breakfast. "Ole Gold, are they ready?" "Yes." The macaw nodded with certainty. "Everything is ready. We can set off at any time." Link glanced at the time. It was 9 in the morning. There was still half an hour before the three-way meeting. "It's almost time. Tell them to set off." With the order, Link rose and went to the meeting room. A group of wolf riders in silver armor came out of the castle and headed south into the desert. Chapter 410 The Freedom Federation's Three-Sided Summit. Link started the video conference first. The three commanders of the Sand Capital were already online. Besides the top leaders of Shandu, Dragon City, and Fae, there would also be core management members who would appear in small screens during the three-way summit. Right now, beside Link's frame on the big screen, there were 3 small frames for the 3 commanders. "You're all here," said Link casually, "have you had breakfast?" The 3 of them nodded. Dai Yi was the first to ask, "General, I've seen the wolf in the wilderness on TV commercials in Shadu these days. In fact, I think this thing is too weak. However, before Dai Yi could finish his sentence, a few frames appeared on the video again. On the big picture was a square-faced middle-aged man with a crew cut. His eyes were black, and his skin was bronze. He looked like a statue in a temple. His high cheekbones added a bit of dignity and fierceness. The video showed half of his body in a golden silk robe with a lifelike five-clawed golden dragon embroidered on the chest. Although he was covered in a brocade robe, the muscles hidden inside were still somewhat obvious. Congratulations to General Lin for becoming the Supreme Commander of Shandu. Link nodded slightly with a smile. City Lord Su must be joking. I'm just being assigned a task at a critical moment. It doesn't count. The person who was talking to Link was Su Tianzhao, the Lord of Dragon City. Beside Su Tianzhao's profile picture, Link saw 4 small boxes. These 4 were Su Tianzhao's think tank. Link paused for half a second on one of them, and Su Tianzhao sharply noticed it. General Lin and Master Lang know each other. Su Tianzhao asked with a puzzled look. Link chuckled. I've only heard that Captain Lang used to be from Shita before moving to Dragon City. Now that I've seen her, I'm curious and took a look. On the small screen, Captain Lang suddenly said, General Lin, may I ask who you heard about this from? I heard General Alongso mention it when I was chatting with him. It was said that after the Day of Reckoning, he, Moros, and a young man called Lang Guan used to live in Shandu together. It was said that this good friend of his went to Dragon City after many years and even became the captain of the guards by Castellan Su's side. When I saw the name list yesterday, I couldn't help but think of what General Alongso had said before, so I matched it. On the small screen, Lang Guan's white silk drooped down to his chest. His face was ruddy and his skin was as soft and delicate as a baby's. One could not tell that he was an old man at all. A pair of eyes sparkled as if they contained starlight, giving people a feeling that his essence, energy, and spirit were at their peak, as if the 3 were at the peak. He, I see. I didn't expect Alongso to remember me. However, it was a pity. Some time ago, he thought that they would meet again in Dragon City after 40 years of separation. He did not expect that he would sigh and say nothing more. The cold door that Link saw on the small screen was one of the missions left behind by the Prince of the Desert, the Revenge of the Mandala. Back then, Lang Guan had been the captain of the Desert Prince's guards and had personally participated in the plot to backstab the prince. After dividing the treasures, he led his men and fled to Dragon City. He was ready to live a rich life. However, he did not expect to be valued by the Su family in Dragon City because of his identity and outstanding martial arts. He became the martial arts instructor of the Su family's legitimate son, Su Tianzhao. After that, under the leadership of Su Tianzhao, the Su family dominated the Dragon City, and Lang Guan naturally became the captain of Su Tianzhao's guards. As soon as Lang Guan's voice fell, a video from a third party was also connected to the big screen. The first thing Link saw was the head of the Far Night Council, Augustine Frank, who was dressed elegantly. His lips were as thin as a cicada's wings, only dotted with a trace of blood. The tip of his nose was slightly raised, giving him an uncomfortable sense of pride. A monocle was embedded in his right eye, and it was attached to his coat with a golden thread. The background of the video was slightly dark, but it brought out the sickly white skin vividly. Her exquisite hair was tied in a complicated way, and she was as elegant as an elf. Unlike Su Tianzhao's golden dragon embroidered robe, Augustine wore a military uniform with 3 colors: white, blue, and red. There were 5 medals on the left side of his chest, with a golden tassel circling around it. General Lin, it's a pleasure to meet you, Augustine nodded slightly. At this point, all the main characters of the Freedom Federation's tripartite summit had come online and arrived. The meeting had officially begun. Link smiled. 2 of the people on the screen were the targets of Mandala's revenge. Dragon City Guard Captain Lang Guan, Head of Day, Augustine. One of them was the teacher of Dragon City's city Lord Su, and the other was the head of state of Fayet. If he wanted to become enemies with the two of them, it would be no less than declaring war on Dragon City and Fayet. A trace of guilt appeared on Su Tianzhao's face. At the beginning of the meeting, I would like to express my apologies for the death of General Alongso, the former leader of Shandu, in the plane 4 months ago. After the plane landed in Dragon City, the investigation team formed by us and the Shandu military conducted a thorough search of the plane, but in the end, we still couldn't find any clues about the murderer. Augustine also put his hand on his chest and nodded slightly. I'm sorry about General Alongso's death. Link's gaze was firm as he looked at the two leaders in the video. He said with certainty, "We've sealed General Alongso's private plane. Although the incident has happened more than 4 months ago, we will not give up on the investigation. We swear to find the real murderer who killed the general and protect the reputation of Sand City." After some small talk, the meeting of the three leaders officially began. General Lin, although we know that you are not familiar with all the affairs in Shandu since you have taken over as the supreme leader, we still have to ask how the remaining forces in Shandu are and whether they can resist the next attack of the Desert Coalition forces. According to the assessment, Dragon City and Faya will send out suitable mecha clans to assist. After listening to Augustine's words, Commander Dai and Commander Mun were expressionless. If even Link wasn't familiar with the affairs of the Shitu, then no one would. After all, the military, financial, and even Inhuman's power in the entire Sand City were all in Link's hands. Link nodded. I understand. Next, I'll let the commander of the Shudu Land Army, Fernandez, introduce the details of the military strength in Shudu. Fernandez, the tool man, took the materials and began to explain. There are still 4,237 soldiers in the Shandu Army, 2,177 registered members of the Fox Hunting Special Forces, 1,621 intelligence personnel and spies from the Special Intelligence Department, 300 Air Force personnel in service, and a number of air strike forces. After Fernandez finished, he looked at Link's expression and found nothing unusual. After Fernandez's report, Link saw that the core members of Dragon City and Magic Knight were all whispering to each other in the video conference. After a moment, Su Tianzhao, the master of Dragon City, said, according to Commander Fernandez's introduction, the total military strength of Shandu is only 8,335 people. The population of Shandu is 45 million, and the military strength only accounts for 0.0178% of the total population. Based on our considerations, the current forces in Shandu may not be able to face the joint attack of the Wasteland Gang and the Machinery Faith. At this moment, head of state Fei, Augustine, also said, Fayet and Dragon City have the same opinion. There is a lack of troops in Shandu, which is not enough to deal with the joint attack of the desert forces this time. So we unanimously decided to send more troops to Shandu. When the two leaders were done, Link straightened his back and said slowly, the two heads of state are right. I also thank you for your kindness, but Shandu can deal with the desert's extremist forces on its own. It doesn't need the support of Dragon City and Fei. Link's words were like a bomb. In the video conference, the expressions of the Dragon City and the Magic Knight members changed. The two leaders' expressions stiffened and were slightly unnatural. They really did not expect Link to reject the proposal. This was a rule set when the Freedom Federation was first established. The two of them couldn't help but look at the three commanders on the screen, as if asking, didn't you tell Link about the Freedom Federation's rules? At this moment, the three commanders felt a lot of pressure as they looked at the dozens of eyes in the video conference. It was not that they had not told Link about this before, but Link would not listen to their own considerations. What could they do? Su Tianzhao took a deep breath, and it was clear from his tone that he was suppressing his anger. I think General Lin is still unclear about the current situation. This decision was made when the three special cities signed the Freedom Federation's agreement. Once one side's combat strength is evaluated to be insufficient to deal with the crisis, the other two sides will need to send reinforcements in time. This is also the reason why the Freedom Federation was able to stand tall on the wasteland planet for 40 years. With the current military strength in Shandu, once the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang launch a large-scale attack, the mech city, tanks, and long-range firepower will be lined up in a row more than 10 kilometers away from Shandu. Then, Shandu will be completely reduced to ruins. By then, the entire Sand City will fall, and we in the southern part of Fei will be completely exposed to the enemy's firepower. Not only do Dragon City and Farnight have to face the Beast Tide and the Dark Forest's invasion, but they also have to pay attention to the erosion of the desert's extremist forces in the south. Neither of us can accept the fact that our territory is in danger of being attacked from both sides because of General Lin's momentary stubbornness, Augustine said. After the two of them spoke, the atmosphere of the entire video conference suddenly became tense. As the commander of the special forces, Dai Yi felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He was afraid that he would cause any unhappiness. Just as he was about to open his mouth, he saw Benjamin suddenly appear at the door and make some kind of gesture to the people in the meeting. Seeing this, Link nodded slightly. "I'm not rejecting your help because I'm being reckless. I'm just confident in the strength of the Shitu Kingdom. It just so happens that we have a 300-man mobile unit entering the desert this morning, and now we have real-time footage from the front. I wonder if the two heads of state are interested in watching it." Dai Yi's mouth was slightly agape. How could he not know that there was a 300-man mobile force advancing into the desert? He couldn't help but look at Fernandez and Mun with doubt. The two of them shook their heads, and Fernandez, as the supervisor of the army, did not know about it. Suddenly, Dai Yi remembered that 3 days ago, Link had asked them to select a group of soldiers who were good at Kung Fu and send them to the Weeping Valley. Combined with the new wild wolf mount that had appeared in the past 2 days, he was secretly shocked. Could it be that Link had already prepared this beforehand? On the other end of the video conference, Su Tianzhao and Augustine were like twin brothers. They frowned at the same time. Even the core group of the two was full of doubts. What could a 300-man mobility troop do against the troops of the Machinery Faith and the Wasteland Gang when they marched into the desert? However, since Link had invited her, it would be too stingy of her to reject him directly as the leader. "Since General Lin has spoken, then we will respectfully comply." Link waved his hand, and Benjamin immediately contacted the backstage staff through the walkie-talkie, directly connecting the signal from the front of the battlefield to the video conference. After a moment, another scene appeared on the screen. In the picture, a giant wolf covered in a metallic luster was flying like lightning in the desert. The soldiers in the armor of the giant wolves were also extremely fierce. They had submachine guns, composite bows with delayed explosive arrows, and even throwing earth spike traps. All kinds of weapons, equipment, and attack methods were dazzling. The giant wolf of the wilderness pounced towards the armed jeep of the Desert Coalition Army. Its huge body even completely covered the armed jeep, and its sharp claws instantly tore the mercenaries behind the car who were operating the light machine gun into 2 halves. The spine, along with the intestines and various pancreas organs, along with the clearly visible blood vessels and the blood that splashed in all directions, was scattered in the desert. Soon, it was covered in a layer of sand and disappeared from people's sight. The entire armed jeep was knocked over. The mechanical zealots and mercenaries jumped out of the vehicle and rolled on the ground in a sorry state, shooting at the seemingly ferocious giant iron-wrapped beasts. The muzzle of the gun spewed out a fire dragon and hit the body of the giant wolf. The powerful alloy completely absorbed the kinetic energy of the bullet and burst out like a star. The next second, the giant wasteland wolf rushed forward and bit the mechanical zealot in one bite. His exoskeleton armor and half of his body were directly sent flying. Blood mixed with engine oil dripped down from the giant wolf's metal helmet. The remaining enemies were all killed by the firing and the attack of the giant wolves. In less than a minute, the man and the wolf had completely eliminated the enemy in the armed jeep. The speed and efficiency of their actions shocked everyone watching the live broadcast. Some of the core members of Dragon City and Far Knight's leadership even stood up to take a closer look. This Pai Xiu isn't a mechanical body. It's a real giant wolf that's covered in a layer of metal armor. But what kind of species is this giant wolf? Why is its speed and damage so fast? They're too big. They're even bigger than the mutated wolves we've seen. I've never seen such terrifying creatures before. How on earth were they tamed? Even Su Tianzhao and Augustine's expressions changed slightly. If Link's 300 soldiers referred to these wolf riders, then they must be a terrifying force. At this moment, the livestream scene was zoomed out. 300 wolf cavalry soldiers were wreaking havoc in the desert, and the armed jeeps of the Machinery Faith and Wasteland Gang were killed until they were in a mess.